Gentlemen, we're going to call to order our 7:30 hearing. This is on the application of HDMW Randolph Avenue LLC with respect to property that's located at approximately 711 Randolph Avenue, Milton, which property is located in the zoning district Residence A and C. The applicant is requesting a comprehensive permit pursuant to General Laws, Chapter 40B, Sections 20 and 23 as amended to allow the development of 2 3-story buildings with 90 new residential units, 25 of which, namely 23 units, will be affordable for households earning up to 80% of the area median income. All is set forth in the application and plans on file with the board. My name is John Leonard. I'm chairman of the Board of Appeals. With me tonight, to my immediate right, is board member Virginia Donahue King, and to my immediate left is board member Jeffrey Mullen. We're tape recording the proceedings this evening so that it's very important, if we have to go to the tape in order to prepare a written decision here, that we know who's speaking. So it may be a little bit tedious, but we'd ask that before anyone speaks that you tell us your name and address. Once you've done that, you could just tell us your name so that we can clearly identify if we need to resort to the tape as to what anyone said and to prepare an accurate decision. Let me just cover a few of the preliminaries for some of the folks who are appearing tonight. This is a larger crowd than normally appeals at the Board of Appeals meetings. They tend to be relatively small and involve only people who have a direct interest in a rather small matter. We don't follow the rules of evidence. We follow the Administrative Procedure Act, so we don't involve cross-examination of witnesses. We try to conduct these hearings as informally as possible, and we want to take the evidence in as coherent a manner as we can and not break it up into various pieces. It's important that we have reasonable decorum at the hearings. These aren't political hearings, so we don't allow signs, banners, cheering, hissing, booing, clapping, or anything like that. And that's never happened in any, except for one instance in my 15 years as chairman of this board. We probably will sit from about 7:30 to about 10 o'clock, depending on where we are with Mr. Caggiano's presentation. We can go beyond that a little bit, but I really don't like to go beyond 10:30 because it tends to be an imposition on the public, and sometimes as well as the board. For this particular hearing this evening, we have Attorney Alan Caggiano from Mintz Levin. He's representing the applicant. Mr. Caggiano, why don't you stand up and introduce yourself to everyone so they'll know who you are.
Sure. My name is Alan Caggiano. I'm a real estate lawyer at Mintz Levin. Partner in that group, and been there for probably 12 years.
And we've also received an appearance from Ms. Kathleen O'Donnell, who is special counsel to the town of Milton. Ms. O'Donnell, are you here?
Yes, I am.
Why don't you just introduce yourself to everyone?
I'm Kathleen O'Donnell, and I'm a Milton resident. I work with the special counsel to the Board of Selectmen on 40B projects, and this is one of them.
Ms. O'Donnell, let me ask you this. Would you feel more comfortable if we arranged a seat for you at the table here, or do you prefer to sit with your client?
No, I certainly could sit at the table. I was leaving that to your discretion.
Okay, then when we finish the preliminaries, we'll arrange to have a seat for you at the table because it's just impossible to try to take notes and balancing them on your knees, okay? Now, let me ask, is there any other attorney present this evening who is representing abutters or other interested people in this application? Yes, sir.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman. My name is John Whitten. I represent Joseph Lombardi, who lives on Highland Avenue. And with the chairman's permission, I'd like to address the board.
What's the name?
Fine, and Mr. Whitten, do you, pardon?
Lombardi.
Yes. Do you prefer to stay back in the audience with Mr. Lombardi, who's ever back there with you, or do you prefer to take a seat at the table?
I'm fine right here, Mr. Chairman, but thank you for asking.
Okay, that's great. Is there any other lawyer who is in attendance tonight who wishes to participate in these proceedings? Okay, the record indicates there's no...
On behalf of a client?
Well, yes, unless they represent... You can represent yourself if you're an attorney, but that's usually considered inadvisable. But I leave that to you.
As an attorney, I know that all too well.
Well, are you an attorney?
I'm a Milton resident here in that capacity.
Okay. Then,
I am an attorney, but I'm not representing a client.
okay, well, if a client hires you, just let us know. And but otherwise, if you want to be heard, obviously you will be heard. When we're dealing with the public in hearings where we have this many people, what we like to try to do is to have the citizenry either submit written correspondence to the board, to submit petitions to the board on various issues. If you think traffic is an issue and 50 people believe that the traffic is inadequate under the present plan, you can certainly file a petition with the board. We'll make copies for the other parties to the case. But we don't want 50 people talking at the same hearing saying the same thing. Otherwise, we'll be here for until April or May. But on the other hand, I do want to assure the public that you will certainly have the full right to participate in these hearings, even though you don't have an attorney or you wish to represent yourself. Or if you are an attorney and you do want to represent yourself. So, but most of the preliminary work dealing with the application, a description of the issues, a description of the engineering and other concepts will probably be done by professional witnesses, as you'd expect that to be. But if individual members of the public do have questions, you'll certainly have a chance to pose the questions. We don't cross-examine witnesses at Board of Appeals hearings, but if you have a question, the question is addressed to the board, and if the question is appropriate, we'll pose it to Mr. Caggiano or one of his expert witnesses and ask that they answer the question. And as I say, we're delighted to take any written submittals that anyone wants to propound, to submit, and they will be treated just as if you spoke at the hearing. We're on television. Some people are adverse to being on television. They don't feel comfortable. And so writing letters or signing petitions is an excellent way to proceed if you choose to do so. Likewise, I don't know whether we're going to hear from any elected public officials at these hearings. But if we do, we generally take them out of order because they generally have important issues to deal with at night. And sometimes it's an inconvenience. So if we have a public official, it appears, we'll probably take them out of order if they choose to do so, so that they can be heard and we can move on. The process that we're going to follow here is, I think, the usual process for applications like this is, first of all, we're going to hear from the applicant. And the applicant is going to make a presentation. We have a slideshow. Once that begins, we'll move over to the side so everyone will be able to see the visual presentations of the various witnesses, and they can hear. This is usually for TV. I don't think that broadcasts the microphone. It goes into the television system. So if at any time in the proceedings you can't hear the witnesses, just raise your hand and just wave, or just give us some signal, because we want to be sure that everyone has a chance to see the written presentation, the video presentation, and likewise to be able to hear what the witnesses are saying. The acoustics in this room are absolutely terrible in my view. And many times the witnesses, and Mr. Caggiano, for example, he'll have his back to you, and he won't be facing you. So if for whatever reason I slur a word, I don't say something that you understand, or I misspeak, or Mr. Caggiano mumbles, don't be afraid to say, I'm sorry, I missed that, and we'll repeat that, so you'll be able to follow all of the evidence in a clear way. My voice is not strong tonight, but I hope you'll forgive me, and likewise, if I drop my voice a little bit, just take me to task for it. So the purpose of hearing from the applicant first in these hearings is basically to identify the significant issues in the case. Many times we go into cases thinking the significant issues are A, B, and C, and we find out they're X, Y, and Z. So Mr. Caggiano's presentation will indicate what the significant issues of the case are, what his position is on those issues. And that helps us to arrange to have certain aspects of this project subject to peer review. There are issues that the applicant may think are not significant, and we do. On the other hand, there are instances where we may think issues are significant and the applicant thinks they may not be. So and we'll try to do that tonight by picking some peer review experts, because it's very important to give peer review experts sufficient time to prepare reports and not unduly burden or slow down this proceeding. This is a very difficult time to get professionals to do anything because we're moving into the holiday season. I guess we're in the holiday season, so we may have some difficulty getting peer review experts, but we'll do our best, and we'll do our best to get them to respond in a prompt manner to these issues. We'll certainly hear from the town officials, and we'll hear from Mr. Whitten, for example, and his client, other abutters who wish to be heard, and then we'll certainly hear from the public interested persons. You don't have to be an abutter to speak at this particular hearing, and we'll be delighted to hear from anybody who wishes to be heard. Mr. Caggiano, I think, why don't you tell us how long do you expect your presentation will be tonight, sir?
I expect it'll be between 30 and 40 minutes.
Okay. And in all of the documents that you, let me do this. What Mrs. Fitzgerald did, and it was really very, very helpful to me, is she prepared a list of the documents that Mr. Caggiano has filed in the various filings that he's made with the board. And I've reviewed it for accuracy. Oh, great, thank you. Why don't you, Mary, would you make sure Mr. Caggiano gets a copy of that? And Miss O'Donnell, I believe it is.
You don't want it now.
What's that? Yeah, I'm fine, Jeffrey, that's okay. Miss O'Donnell, do you have a copy of this document? Okay, well, you should have one. And would you give one to Mr. Whitten as well? And we've got a few extra for the public, but I obviously don't have 30 or 40 copies. I guess my question, Mr. Caggiano, to you is that we did receive a letter in an appearance form and memorandum form from Miss O'Donnell. Did you receive a copy of that?
I did not, no.
You didn't? Okay, well, that's unfortunate. One of the things that happens in these proceedings, regretfully, is people don't understand who are going to be appearing at the hearing and who the lawyers are, and many times the lawyers do not receive all of the documents in the case. But I think this, I think I have an extra of Miss O'Donnell's document. Mr. O'Donnell, do you have an extra copy of, could you give that to Mr. Caggiano? And do you have a copy for Mr. Whitten as well? Or?
I've sent a copy to Mr. Whitten.
Okay, that's great. That's great. And Mr. Caggiano, we also received a letter dated November 26th from the Director of the Department of Public Works of the town of Milton,
Okay.
which is in the file. Did you receive that?
I did not.
Okay. Well, is that the only one in the case file? I've marked mine up. Why don't we do this? Give this to Mr. Caggiano, but I want a copy of that back in the file before we adjourn. No, he has the first one, just the town of Milton letter.
You can give this back to me afterwards.
Okay, thank you.
And don't fret, Mr. Caggiano. You're going to have plenty of opportunity to read the letter and
Sure.
to respond to it in an appropriate manner. I had a question for you on one of the documents, Mr. Casciano, and that deals with the traffic study that you filed with us.
Yes.
When I originally looked at the traffic study, I assumed, but in error, that it was from DeSell and Burke, because their stationery was the cover page of the letter. But in reading the application, I understand that Mr. David Dulaski, Dr. Dulaski, actually prepared the traffic study.
That's correct.
But I didn't note on the traffic study that he signed the traffic study. In fact, I didn't find his name anywhere on the traffic study.
Huh.
And there's certainly no CV attached to the traffic study.
Okay, I'll take care of that.
And there's no statement of limiting conditions or assumptions. I don't know whether he made assumptions or has limiting conditions that you see in most expert reports. But did you expect to have Mr. Dulaski testifying here?
I do, yes.
Oh, great. Okay, then that,
Here he is, yeah. I'm
oh,
looking over here.
Mr. Dulaski, nice to see you. Yeah, I did actually look up your qualifications on the internet, and you're certainly well qualified, and your picture doesn't do you justice on the internet. So just as long as, I don't need a signed document as long as Mr. Dulaski is testifying, but I just felt very uncomfortable looking at a traffic study that didn't bear your imprimatur, let's put it like that. So it'll be good to hear from you, and that solves, I think, the only technical issue that I had. Do you want to talk very briefly about peer review experts?
Sure.
Because it's difficult to do that at the end of the night. It's probably easier to do it early in the proceeding here. You've told me, and I can tell the public, I think, you've filed an application with the Town of Milton Conservation Commission.
That's correct.
And have they had a hearing on this yet, or have they?
We did. We had a hearing a couple of weeks ago. It was extended till December 9th.
Okay, that's great. So in that respect, we probably, I think, don't need an environmental expert. They are our experts, and
Right.
we don't. I don't think you have to go further than that. We probably need a traffic engineer. I think that's probably. It's not. I know Mr. Dulaski doesn't agree with that, but I think most people would suggest that a peer review of the traffic report is probably in order, unless my board members disagree with that. I'd like to run a couple of names by you, because I don't want to start to talk about peer review experts and find out that you've had either a bad experience with them or had a run-in with them, or somehow there's a conflict of interest involved in it. We want to get somebody who has an independent viewpoint. One expert that I would propose to discuss it with is Jeffrey Dirk of Vanasse Associates. Do you know Jeffrey Dirk?
I don't personally.
I do.
You do, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Is he in some way conflicted out here with?
I don't know of any conflict. Mr. Dirk does work on other projects that, various attorneys in our firm are involved in.
Okay.
So he's an excellent traffic engineer.
Yeah, they say he's very excellent, and to be frank about it, and I think you want me to be frank, I'm not sure we can get Mr. Dirk, because I know he's enormously busy. But I'll see if he is available and on a public service. The other expert that came to mind is Robert Michaud, M-I-C-H-A-U-D, of Marlborough, Mass. Do you know Bob Michaud?
Daniel says he knows them.
Good. Yes, you like that? Okay. Yeah, Daniel knows them. I
Okay,
think the
and you-
preference would be Jeffrey Dirk if possible.
Okay. And Mr. Michaud, even though you know him, is there any reason perhaps why we should not consider him?
Not that I know of.
Okay, great. So I'll try to get Mr. Dirk involved, and if not, I'll talk with Mr. Michaud and see if we can pin down one of those two people, and with some type of a definitive date when the peer review can be completed. Okay. The other thought was, and I can certainly hear from my colleagues, that one of the issues seems to be the water supply and the public safety aspect of that, and and some other basic development issues. And somebody recommended to me, I've never used any of these experts, to be frank, but somebody recommended Horsley and Witten. And I guess my question is, Mr. Witten, is that your former firm? Or?
It is, Mr. Chairman. I have no ownership interest in the firm and haven't for over 12 years. So the name still remains the Horsley Whitman Group.
Okay, I know they're doing, thank you very much. I know they're doing work on one other 40B application for the town. I've heard they've done good work, but I don't know that. Do you have any problems with Horsley and Witten, if I can get them involved?
Would you mind just letting us know the other two that you're suggesting?
No, I don't have anybody else on
Oh, you
this
don't?
aspect of it. They're more difficult to find than traffic engineers. You have, Jeffrey, do you have anybody that you could recommend to do the basic peer review on the engineering, the water?
You saw the wedding.
They're working for the town.
Or Jenny?
Yeah,
Maybe,
somebody
so-
from,
And that's a competitor. Yeah.
Right. And then the ones that were, go ahead.
yeah.
I think it's a conflict. On the other one.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
with all due respect to Horsley and Witten, we prefer a different peer reviewer for that component of the
Okay.
project.
Do you have anybody that you'd like to suggest?
Could I get back to you with a
Of course you
suggestion or
can.
two?
Yeah, sure, of course you can.
How
And we'll,
about Scott Turner at Judith Nitch?
my friend, Mr. Mullen here says that he's dealt with Scott Turner at Judith Nitch and Associates. Does that raise issues? Or?
Have you heard of them?
I
Very
don't know the
good.
firm.
Outstanding.
Don't know the individual.
He's
They do a lot
outstanding.
of- They do a fair amount of municipal work.
I know they wouldn't.
They don't-
He's a site guy.
Okay.
Yeah, they do traffic, but not him. He's a site guy.
And what was the individual?
Scott Turner.
Scott Turner.
I know
So
Scott.
why don't I give let me take a look at Mr. Turner's resume and
Okay.
give him a call and see if he has any interest in getting involved. Anybody else that, Ginny or Mr. Mullen? No. Okay. Great. So we'll deal with those issues outside of the hearing process and see if we can get them going.
I already did.
Okay. Do you have anything to add, Mr. Mullen? or-
No, thank
No?
you.
Yeah, Mrs. King? I have nothing further to add in terms of preliminaries. How about you, Mr. Casciano? Is there something that we should be discussing that we're not? Or-
I don't think so. I think you covered it well. Thank you.
Okay, that's great. With that having been said, let's get the board out of the way and give you the opportunity to make your presentation. I think Mr. Casciano said 30 to 40 minutes. That probably means an hour or so, but whatever it is, and we can then see how we'll proceed after that.
Thank you.
Oh, we're going to slide over here. Okay, because yeah, okay. Jenny, watch those cords because they can do.
Want to physically change seats, Sean?
No, just slide down. That's fine. I just want to get out of the.
These are my first ones.
Mr. Casciano, the floor is yours.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, my name is Paul Holland. I'm with the Holland Companies.
Good. Welcome to the Board of Appeals, Mr. Holland.
Thank you.
Good to
Thank
meet you.
So tonight, myself and my team are going to be presenting this village-style apartment complex that we've been talking about. This is a project that we've been working on for several years in the planning stages, and we're looking forward to working cooperatively with the board as we move forward in this process. We've already, in cooperation with the planning department, made some revisions to our plans. And a couple weeks ago, we had a Conservation Commission meeting where there was a lot of positive feedback and suggestions, and we're in the process of incorporating some of those suggestions into our the environmental protection measures and so forth that we're working on. Before I introduce all the members of my team, I just want to tell you a little bit about myself and our company. So we're a second-generation company. We are in construction and real estate. My father started the original construction company 50 years ago, and today it's run by myself and 3 of my brothers. We do residential and commercial construction all across eastern Massachusetts, and we also own and self-manage an apartment portfolio that is in Boston and the South Shore. Here with me tonight, I have Gary Gartner from Shesky Architects. Milton's favorite engineer, Jim Burke, is on vacation, so we have Jim Dussel Jr. here. Marilyn Newman and Alan Caggiano are our project attorneys. We have Rebecca Bachand is the landscape architect for the project. And then we also have Dan Delaski as the traffic engineer. I think I got everybody there.
Scott.
Oh, Scott, sorry. We have Scott Morrison. He's the wetland scientist with, I apologize, Scott, with Ecotech. Last but not least, we have Lynn Sweet, who is going to be the next person up, and she is the 40B consultant with LDS Consulting Group.
I'm just going to remain seated so I can look at you in the screen if that's okay.
Sure, that's fine.
For the record, Lynn Sweet, LDS Consulting Group, 233 Needham Street, Newton, Massachusetts. Mr. Chairman and board members, I'm pleased to be here. I have over 25 years of real estate development experience and particularly working on apartments and 40B projects. Our goal today is to give you an overview of all the aspects of H&W Apartments. As mentioned, we have about a 35-minute presentation, and we'll appreciate your cooperation as we go through all of our slides. And as Paul mentioned, we are very open to suggestions that you and the audience feel will improve the project and can be achieved in a cost-effective manner. We are very excited about where we are in the process and the evolution of the design and the buildings. And this is an overview of what we're going to cover today. So where are we in the process? We talked a little bit about that in the opening remarks, that we filed a site eligibility. We received a site eligibility letter back in May. Based on feedback that we got from town officials and neighbors, we revised our site plan significantly, and we had that site eligibility letter ratified by Mass Housing. And I believe all of the documents that went in for that filing with Mass Housing were delivered to the Board of Selectmen in the last few days. And I think a copy has also hopefully made its way to you today. We met with the neighbors last winter as well. We're in front of you and for the ZBA. We did have our first wetlands hearing. We got some really good feedback. We're going to be in front of them next week. We also filed an approval not required plan because the site sits between 2 homes, and that's exactly where our access is. So we're trying to separate those lots out. And I think that's it for where we are in the process. We're hoping to construct next year. Very optimistic. I'm just going to try and go through some differences between what was under the site eligibility and what we're giving you today. We are proposing 90 units of workforce housing in 2 3-story buildings. The site eligibility application had 72 units. We are proposing 67 market units and 23 affordable units at 80% of area median income. That is 25% of the units, which is the statutory requirement under Chapter 40B. There will be 43 one-bedroom units, 38 two-bedroom units, and 9 three-bedroom units. So our three-bedroom units only comprise 10% of all of the units, whereas in our site eligibility application, 50% of our units were three-bedroom units. So the total bedroom count that we're proposing today is 146 bedrooms, whereas the site eligibility application had 153 bedrooms. So although we may have more units, the units are smaller and the buildings are clustered closer together. As mentioned, we have 23 affordable units, 10 one-bedrooms, 10 two-bedrooms, and 3 three-bedrooms. The affordable rents will be between approximately $1,171 a month for a one-bedroom and $1,608 for a three-bedroom. When we looked at the housing production plan for the town of Milton on page 30, it mentioned that Milton rents averaged between $1,475 and $3,200. So these truly are affordable for Milton. In fact, our market rate rents that we're projecting today are between $1,500 and $2,600. So in the grand scheme of Milton, even our market rate rents are relatively affordable to that $3,200 amount mentioned in your housing production plan. We are providing modern apartments with all of life's everyday amenities, including a fitness center, passive recreation, under building parking. In fact, more than 50% of our parking will be under the building, and that's very good for the environment. And we've also included safety features in our buildings that you wouldn't typically find in a single-family home, including a full sprinkler system and an on-site hydrant. Overall, we are proposing a compact, sustainable, affordable housing. The housing's been designed to meet the needs for affordable housing locally and regionally. There are a lot of green features, and our architect will go into that in greater detail. We're looking at zip cars, charging stations. We are only giving one parking space per unit, so if someone wants a second unit, they're going to have to pay for it. Hopefully that will encourage people to look at public transportation as an alternative. We also believe that the property, as I mentioned, meets the local and regional need for affordable housing, and in fact, the town has recently completed a housing production plan. And we've taken a few quotes out of that housing plan, and we believe that our project fits in exactly with some of the needs that were mentioned in that housing production plan. In fact, the housing production plan says that 34% of all households in Milton cannot afford the lowest rent in Milton. That's over 1/3 of residents. And, you know, we believe the town's done a great job of providing some housing choice for seniors. You have Fuller Village, you have Unquity House, but you really don't have any housing choice for young and middle-aged professionals. And really, that's what this housing is going to add. As noted, there have been sharp decreases in this particular population, the 20 to 35-year-old population. And it's not because they don't want to live here, it's because they can't afford to live here. We also are providing what we're referring to, what you referred to in your housing production plan as right-sized housing. As mentioned previously, we have 43 one-bedroom units and 38 two-bedroom units. And our unit sizes are significantly smaller than you would find in a single-family home. Our one-bedroom units are around 750, our two bedrooms around 1,100, and our three around 1,300. A typical single-family home is going to be 2,000 or 3,000 square feet. So we're providing this housing, again, in a very compact, right-sized manner. So I'm now going to turn the presentation over to Gary Gardner, who is our architect, and he's going to speak more about how we fit into the community, what the buildings look like. I'm sure everyone's anxious to hear about that, and some of the green aspects we're offering.
Yes, Mr. Mullen, do you have a question of the witness?
Do we ask questions as we go along? How do you want to
You can do whatever you like.
I have just a fundamental question.
Sure.
And that is, can you identify for us when you're presenting information that's going to change?
I don't know that answer.
So we heard that we heard at the top that the application has already changed and that there are more changes coming?
No. No,
Well, then I'm confused.
I apologize. I was pointing out that when the site eligibility application was approved by Mass Housing last May, they approved a 72-unit project. And between that time and our filing with the ZBA, We amended our plans because we were told very strongly that there were too many 3-bedrooms, as well as there was concern over where the buildings were sited. So we went back into Mass Housing with a 90-unit plan, and we received from Mass Housing basically a ratification letter saying that we agree with all of the findings in our site eligibility. And that information is what was included in the ZBA package. The 90-unit development is what you have in front of you today. I was simply trying to bring you and the audience up to speed as to the changes from when we were at the site eligibility stage to where we are today.
Okay. So that was one set of the changes. There was another set of changes as a result of the Concom meeting from last week. Are there going to be changes to anything that you told us or will tell us based
For-
on the Concom?
For me, no. The Conservation Commission changes are, if you have a drainage line going this way, maybe you should add a second one. So those are the kinds of changes that they're providing. Maybe instead of using one kind of a culvert, you should use another culvert. So I actually didn't speak at the Concom, and sure there's someone else that can answer those questions. But
At
we
some point, will
have.
those be in front of us?
Absolutely. I suspect anything that's going into the Concom is going to be copied to you, because ultimately, you're going to be you're going to be writing the decision that will include the Conservation Commission findings.
Yeah, I don't want to copy to us. I want to know whether or not the basis of the presentation is going to be including whatever is going on in front of the Concom, that's all.
Yes, it is.
Okay.
Everything that you've seen and what the ComCon has seen and what's in front of you is the latest and greatest of everything.
Right.
That may change throughout the process as we have hearings.
That's the question. So when do we find out about that?
Well, we just began the ComCon process, had a meeting, a hearing a couple of weeks ago. So, as we have another hearing with them and they're making suggestions that we want to incorporate into the project, then we'll update the plans and resubmit them at that time. But we don't know at this point what those changes are going to be.
But those changes aren't going to change, the information I gave you as to the unit count, the affordability, the number of buildings, and all of that.
Yeah.
They're of a much deeper technical nature, I guess.
So that feels confusing to me. I'm sure we can get over it. What would help me, at least, I don't know about speak for the other board members, is when we come to an item that is also, because we don't go to the Concom.
Sure.
When we come to an item that is also in front of the Concom, if you could just let us know that this item might change depending upon the outcome of the Conservation Commission deliberations, that would be helpful. We can make a note, and then it won't be confusing when the changes come in, something like that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mullen. I think that in light of the discussion about change, I may have been remiss in not reading a letter that Mr. Holland sent to the board. And I'm going to read that letter. It's part of the application process here. It's the November 6, 2014 letter. And it explains the reason for the change in the present application vis-a-vis what was approved by the state regulatory authorities previously. The letter is dated November 6, 2014, and it's to the Board of Appeals, and it's from Paul Holland, the manager of the applicant. And he says, we're pleased to submit our General Laws Chapter 40B application to the Zoning Board of Appeals for 90 units of multifamily housing to be located on Randolph Avenue in Milton. Enclosed, please find the application materials in the table of contents, and we'll provide the fees. Then he gets to the pertinent part. Please note that in response to the request by the town of Milton to reduce the number of 3-bedroom units included within our initial development proposal, the enclosed development plans include plans that have been revised since the issuance of the Mass Housing Project eligibility letter dated May 27, 2014. The changes to unit count and type reflected within the enclosed materials have been discussed at length with the town planner, William Clark. We have already met with and provided Mass Housing with documentation relative to the revised development, and we have obtained a letter from Mass Housing, a copy of which is enclosed, reaffirming the initial project eligibility letter, indicating that the findings required to be made by Mass Housing when it's issued its initial project eligibility letter remain unaltered. A list of the documentation containing the revisions to the original application to the Mass Housing for the initial project eligibility letter can be found at tab 13 of the table of contents. The changes to the development reflected within the enclosed application will provide additional affordable housing units addressing the immediate pressing and local and regional need for affordable housing in the town of Milton. The revised development plan is consistent with the town of Milton's recently approved housing production plan as explained in the closed materials. While we believe that we would not be prohibited in locating the development within the easement area currently encumbering the development site, we have nonetheless moved all buildings and associated basement-level structured parking outside of such easement area in order to accommodate the expressed concerns regarding the same. We look forward to meeting with Mary Fitzgerald and the other representatives and to presenting our application before the board. Thank you for your consideration and time. And it's signed Paul Holland. So that may explain the reason for the change. So Mr. Caggiano, why don't you proceed with your presentation?
Great. Hi, my name is Gary Gardner. I'm with Shesky Architects. Our offices are in Quincy, Massachusetts, at 14 Franklin Street. We've been in business since 1981, so do the math, it's a long time. We have a varied practice, but currently the market seems to be a lot of projects like this, so we do a lot of residential projects throughout southeastern Massachusetts, primarily within a 10-mile radius of Quincy. And I will walk you through in very broad strokes our understanding of the project, what we feel is important, and I'm sure there'll be a lot of detailed questions that may come later, but we'd like to move this along quickly and just cover the high points. And I'd like to start with just a broad overview of where we are relative to the rest of Milton. And what you see on the screen here, this circle is a 2-mile radius that's centered on the project site. On the subject project, which is not on that side of the street, it's actually on this side of the street, between the two arrows for the within that 2-mile radius, there are all the accommodations that residents need for living. For living space, there's convenient access to shopping, recreation, municipal facilities, medical facilities, religious resources, all convenient to this residential, proposed residential developments. So we feel this is an excellent choice for this kind of proposal. There's transportation. Is this the button here? Wrong button. Immediately adjacent to the site, if I go back to that slide once again on the red side there are 2 arrows that are pointing to the bus stops. They're essentially bus stops at the intersections on the north and the south locations above and below our site. There are 3 bus stops. There's bus number 240, 245, MBTA that bring you to either Quincy or Ashmont Station, and then there's a Brockton Area Transit number 12 that I understand runs quite frequently, 5 to 10 minutes during the weekdays.
I don't think it stops there, though.
It doesn't stop there. Okay, misinformation, I apologize
That's right.
for that. Right,
Stops the hospital.
okay.
The bus stop that you showed on the north, which side of the road is that on? Is that on the left or the right-hand side?
It's on the left-hand side,
It's on the left-hand side, the side the project is on.
correct.
And that bus stop is, what kind did you say?
That's,
Those are only T stops.
those are T-buses,
Okay, that would be the T-bus that's going in a southerly direction.
correct. And then
And-
on the other side, the other bus going in the northerly direction is down towards the, was it Reed Inn Access Road? That's south of the site.
And that's on the other side of the
That's
road,
on
is
the
it?
right-hand side.
The right-hand side of the road.
That's correct. All right.
Sorry, why don't you continue?
Right, I apologize for that.
No, that's fine. I know you want to get through this, but this is a good question, and I think it would help to just clarify where the 240 and where the 245 stop the northbound barrel and on the southbound. The 12 doesn't stop. It only goes to the hospital, and I don't think you're not representing that's the hospital stop, so it would give a little texture to that.
Thank you for that. So moving along to the next slide, just a broad overview of the way we look at the property and how to use it. Randolph Avenue is on the bottom here. There are 6 or 7 mostly ranch-style single-family homes at the bottom of the site. To the right is the Milton DPW, and all around the other sides of the site are single-family homes. Our access is directly off of Route 28. It'll be between residences at 711 and 693 Randolph Avenue. An easement of some sort will be created to gain a single driveway access up to the site. In general, the site is high on the back and low down on the bottom here behind the homes on Randolph Avenue. So there's significant topography. It's over 60 feet from the highest point down to the lowest points. North is this side, south is over here, so east and west. I'll use those compass directions as I talk about the building, so I just want to make that clear. And it gives us kind of an understanding of how the sun's going to move around on the site. On the site, we've located 2 buildings. There's a 30-unit building. There's 30 apartments in let's call it the west building on top, and the east building, there are 60 apartments. In between the 2 buildings is open parking. There's 73 spaces on the surface. In addition to the parking on the surface, the access to the parking in the garages is at the ends of these 2 buildings. So you go in under the building, the parking is in the basement of both buildings. So you drive under the buildings and park in the enclosed parking garages. Also on the site, there's recreational areas. We have a recreation space immediately adjacent to where the amenity space will be in the building. And then
Know
we have-
approximately what size that space is? It's hard to figure out here.
Okay. Which side would it?
The smaller rectangular area that you said is a recreational space. What are the dimensions of
Okay,
that, more or less?
that's about 50 by 30 feet. And then we have another remote location space, which is this green arm extending out towards the north of the site. And that one's about 50 by 100 feet.
And how far is that from the small rectangular space?
Okay, between the 2
Approximately.
is about 100 feet.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And they're just going to be vacant recreational areas, or are you going to have amenities like slides and?
They're-
Probably a tot lot, I would imagine, something like that, yeah.
The one closest to the building would be more the tot lot, and the one remote would be more open, passive, recreational type of space.
And the reason for locating the recreational areas in the area that you did is because of wetland considerations? Is that-
That's part of it, yes. Okay.
So before you get off this slide, you said that the access would be via an easement, but is not the black line the site that the
No.
applicant owns in fee?
Could you?
It is, I can address this. The applicant owns the 2 single, I have a microphone here, thank you, Lynn. Applicant owns the 2 single families on either side of the access drive,
So that's 713 and 693?
711 and 6.
711.
Yep.
Okay.
And we've filed an A&R plan to take a piece of 711, the rear portion of 711 essentially, to add on to the development site.
The rear portion?
Yes, you can see where the black line is behind
The
711.
northerly portion?
I think it's, what is the top west?
The top.
The site faces
north and
east.
south.
Yeah, so if you see 711, the house just to the left of the access drive, the property line right above it, the property from there up is currently part of 711, but we're trying to combine that into the project site through the A&R plan.
Around where the dash line is?
No.
The triangular piece of
The
land.
the dark black line.
Yeah, it's like this 7-Eleven currently kind of
Oh, it does.
Exaggerated a little bit, but something like that, so unusual. So the rear portion of that walkway.
Okay, so if this were to represent all of the property that the applicant owns in fee, it would include 693, the driveway, and what's shown as 7-Eleven, and then all of the land within the black, the dark black line. Is that right?
That's correct. That is owned or controlled essentially by the applicant.
Oh, yeah, there's a
variety of
closely held
different-
organization that's not the same.
That's
But,
correct.
yeah.
That are the ownership entities.
So when you submit the A&R to the planning board, do both 7-Eleven and 693 remain conform?
693 remains the way it is. Nothing's being...
Remains the way, so
yeah,
you're just taking a piece of 7-Eleven?
That's correct.
Does 7-Eleven retain compliance with zoning?
I'm not sure. I haven't analyzed the underlying zoning for 7-Eleven, but the A&R plan that we submitted does comply with the requirements for A&R plans, which is essentially access to a public way and frontage.
Yeah, okay.
I believe it would maintain all the dimensional requirements required by zoning, but otherwise it wouldn't be an A&R.
Or you'd be in front of us for a whole nother reason.
Right.
Yeah.
We'd welcome that.
Thank you.
The driveway, is that really a driveway? This town's not going to have any involvement in that, right?
It'll be a private way.
Private way, yeah.
Driveway, not a private way.
Private way.
Yeah, the access way into the site?
It's a driveway?
Yes, yes,
Okay.
yep, not a public way.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Okay, moving along to the next slide. This is really just talking about what the intention is here in terms of program and goals. We want, in the two buildings, we want to essentially reiterate what we just talked about. We wanted to provide 90 apartments of a unit mix of mostly one-bedrooms and two-bedrooms. We have 43 one-bedroom apartments, we have 38 two-bedroom apartments, and we have 9 three-bedroom apartments. So if we do some percentages, that's about 48% one-bedrooms, 42% two-bedrooms, and 9% three-bedroom apartments. As mentioned at the beginning by the chairperson, 25% of these apartments will be affordable, so that 25% of 90 works out to be 23 affordable apartments. Part of the program that we envision for this project is to create some amenity spaces within the building, so there's common recreational spaces interior to the building. We need a leasing space, we need a marketing space, we need property management space, and as I mentioned already, we have outdoor recreation space. And the intangible here is we want to create a sense of neighborhood for this proposal. So this is a very hard image to see. Unfortunately, it's ghosted out. I'm sorry it doesn't read very well. But this image is just, for us, kind of a conceptual idea about the community plan. And the smaller building on the western edge of the property is on the highest point of the property, and the easternmost building is on the lower part of the property, and the property steps down. In fact, the first floor of the higher property is 10 feet below the highest point at the property line at the extreme western edge of our parcel. But what we're trying to do is create kind of a village feel, establishing a neighborhood. And so by combining the two buildings together, twinning the buildings together, we're creating a kind of an internal focus. And we want most of the activity to happen between the two buildings. And we also wanted to break the buildings up into shapes that are recognizably residential. So you'll see a lot of pitched roofs and decks and residential materials on the outside of the buildings. In more detail.
Can I ask you a question,
Sure.
please?
Sorry.
You indicate you want all the activity within the confines of the building area, but that's almost by definition because there's no other place to go, isn't? Isn't that right?
Well, there are exterior spaces in this common area between the buildings. That will be used by the residents, but
It seems to me you have two buildings in a parking lot.
Yeah.
Are there sidewalks here anywhere, or am I missing something?
let's go back a little bit. Wrong way. So on the site plan, here's the two buildings. There's a triangular piece of land here. That's probably 30 feet by 75 feet.
What's
it's
the
out-
purpose of that? Is it just architectural, or it's not a
outdoor-
play area?
It's outdoor green space.
Okay.
Yeah. You
But it's
could-
not a dedicated recreation area? is
You
that-
wouldn't go out there and play Frisbee, but you might go out there and sit under a tree and read a book or something. You know, it's whatever the residents want to make of it.
So where are the sidewalks, if there are any?
So if you are walking to the bus, or you're coming home from the bus, or you want to walk down the street, there's a sidewalk, of course, on Randolph Avenue, and there's a sidewalk that goes up the left side of the driveway here, and then you can walk to the entrances of the two buildings. There's an entrance to that building there and one here.
Well, if
You
you,
could-
if
you
you'd
could-
like, I'll touch upon that when I get to the site plan.
Okay.
I can address that for you.
Okay, thank you. Could I ask you a few more questions?
Absolutely.
As long as my voice holds out. And I don't know how to express this because I'm not an engineer and I'm not an architect. But do you know the elevation of the tree line to the, on that westerly line as it presently exists?
Yeah.
Before any construction activity?
It's approximately elevation 160.
That's the top of the trees or the grade?
No, I'm not the top of the trees, but the ground. I misunderstood you.
Okay, the ground is elevation 160.
Right.
Okay. And how about the trees that are on that westerly portion of the property?
I couldn't.
The survey crew is actually spent today and tomorrow locating hopefully all the trees on site. So that's something we'll be able to get to you.
So do you have an idea or a guesstimate whether the height of this building on the westerly side, as it's proposed, which I think is, and I don't have my notes here, I thought that was 4.5 stories or something like that?
Well, there's a slide that will follow very shortly that will describe exactly your.
Is that above the tree line or at the tree line or below the tree line?
Yeah.
Do you know that?
Until we know what the height of the tree line is, I can't accurately answer that question.
Well, you could go out onto the site and look at the trees and figure out how far
Exactly.
a 4.5-story building is, but you don't know that.
I couldn't estimate that unless,
I think one of the
Survey crew was, I wasn't out there.
The grade is sloping significantly down in this direction too, so we're kind of, the buildings are somewhat cutting to the slope a little bit there as well.
Do you know when you anticipate having that additional information?
For the Concom, right?
Yeah, for the Concom, we're shooting to have it for next Tuesday's Concom meeting. actually.
Okay, so it'll be available within a reasonable time, but then we can deal with that issue. Is it your intent, to the extent possible, to shield the residences that are on the westerly portion of your property, to shield your buildings from those
Yeah, we're
residences
going
to
to do
the...
the best we can to kind of preserve as much as the natural treescape as possible along the back to provide them a buffer.
And I may be going way ahead of myself here, but, because I'm not a contractor. But do you, in this particular drawing to me, I understood that the property, which I have not walked, and maybe I don't want to walk it, you could tell me whether it's walkable or not, like it's the forest primeval, looks like it's been deforested of trees. Is it the intent of the developer to maintain as much of the natural, I'll call it trees or forestation, as possible in order to shield those houses on the westerly
I mean,
side?
it's going to make a nicer complex for us, but we don't want to clear the entire site. Certainly where the bulk of the building area is, has to be cleared, but once we get outside of that and we get towards the property edges, we're going to, everywhere we can, we're going to maintain the existing trees.
And do you agree with me that this particular, I'll call it a sketch, as opposed to a plan, doesn't deal with that issue? It doesn't deal with the issue of preservation of as many trees on the site as you can. Is that true?
Yeah, I don't think they're all.
They show no
You might
trees. It
not-
looks like it's been laid waste for this year. Look at that. So are you going to provide us with information regarding the trees that are going to be kept? And
We will.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, that's one of the items we're talking to the Conservation Commission about specifically. So we'll absolutely provide you with the information as we receive it.
We've had previous applications, not dealing with 40B, but dealing with these telecommunications towers, where the siting of the tower near residential developments is a matter of concern. And we've had instances where the applicant has done balloon tests or something to basically show where the proposed height of the tower would be in relation to nearby residences, and then the residences can get an idea as to how they would be able to observe the tower above the tree line. And I guess, do you anticipate doing something like that as part of this project, or?
You know, I'd never heard of something like that. I mean, we'd certainly consider it. It doesn't seem like it's too out.
Okay, so you'll leave that open for the present time, because I think that's an important consideration for certainly the abutters on the west. So I'm sorry to have interrupted your presentation. Why don't you go on?
Sure. Let's see what we can pick up here. Okay, so the village view, and we left off, you were asked about some green space in front of the western building there, that it's green space, it's available for the residents, it's just a nice place to
But
be.
this is not a construction plan. This is a conceptual drawing. Is that what we're dealing with here?
This is an accurate representation minus the details, but, you know, the shapes,
Well,
the sizes.
what do you call the details? Do you call sidewalks details? I don't see any sidewalks there. Maybe you do.
You don't see any sidewalks in this particular view, but what you do see are the roof slopes, you see the balconies and decks, you see the variation of some of the building shapes, and they turn and they bump out from the rest of the building. That's accurate in representation of what's intended here.
Yeah. Can I ask you this? Is it fair to say that because of the presence of the wetlands on the site and because of topographic issues, the site is constrained for you to provide the normal sidewalks that you'd provide on a development if you had the choice to do it?
No, I think we've got the sidewalks that we would typically have on a development like this.
Well, where are the sidewalks on that picture?
So if we go back to this tiny little plan,
Can't get off this
so
plan.
this light
Just
yellow-
keep it here for the rest of the night.
Yeah, right. This is a sidewalk.
Well, I mean, I want to see I don't want to see people get run over by cars, so usually you have sidewalks to
Yeah,
protect them.
so there's sidewalks on both sides. There's a
Where's-
sidewalk on this side as well that goes from essentially from Randolph Avenue all the way up to the front door of each building.
Okay.
Yeah, on both sides of the, once you get inside this area. on
Where's
both
the
sides.
sidewalk on the westerly building? I don't see it.
It's this yellow, immediately adjacent to the building. That's right.
Outside of the entrance to the building.
Yeah, the entrance to that building is right there.
Why wouldn't you provide more sidewalks? Would it just constrain the flow of traffic or the movement of traffic on the site?
I think there's adequate sidewalks
Okay.
to safely get the residents from the public street up to their front door without.
Is that a particular
encountering any
concern if you have children in the apartment complex,
Sure.
having adequate sidewalks to
Yeah.
protect them?
But once again, we do have sidewalks all around both buildings.
All around both buildings?
Not all around the
You don't-
backs.
you don't
but,
mean that.
uh,
You have some
around
on the front.
fronts of both buildings, if you want to.
Can I ask you a question?
Yes,
You have two buildings here.
correct.
The building on the east, is that building as long as the football field?
It's about that long, yes.
And that's a 4.5-story building, is it?
It's a 4-story building, yes.
With 2 levels of parking below, or is it
One
one
level
and
of
a half?
parking below.
How many?
One level,
1 level below.
right.
With 60 units. Your first development, which was only 72 units,
Correct.
you had 3 buildings, and the buildings were, looked to me like they were equal sized.
There were, yes,
Yeah, and they contained the same number of units, to the best of my recollection.
but there were 72, this is 90.
Yeah, 72, yes. So why didn't you do 3 buildings here? Was there some reason from an architectural and engineering perspective that required a 60-unit building?
Sure.
What was that reason?
The more buildings you have, the more site area it takes because you need space between buildings. So if we had 3 buildings on the site, even though they'd be 3 smaller buildings, they would create more, take up more site area, create more impervious area, and requires to spread out the developed property. So this is actually more efficient in terms of usage of the land without paving more. You'd
Well,
have
you
longer
should,
driveways.
sure, but you could build one big building, and I guess that would be more efficient. It would just be a disaster.
Right.
Can you point, if we take that 60-unit building as ground zero, where can you show us anywhere within 5 miles of that building where there's a similar building that's 100 yards long containing 60 units of residential development? Does that building exist anywhere in Milton or in Randolph or in any of the surrounding communities?
I'd have to do some research on that to get.
Is that a consideration, whether it's site appropriate? In other words, my real question is, did you have to build a building that's 60 feet, strike it, that's 60 units and is 100 yards long like a football field in order to get enough units to make the project economically feasible? Is that what we're talking about here?
And then, because I think you're responding to what you see on a piece of paper in a flat view, right? For the 300-foot long footprint.
Yes, sir.
But what you
Well, I know
actually-
football fields. I used to
Right,
play football
right.
as a kid.
Cathedral High.
But what you're actually
We
gonna
heard
see
all
is
about it in the past.
you're gonna see
Let's
what's
talk
like a
about his
collection
career.
of buildings together. You're not gonna see one long factory building. I think that's what you're describing sounds to me more like a one long building.
The plan that I saw showed that you could walk from the, let's say, the southerly portion of that building through an interior corridor all the way to the northerly portion of the building. So there's one corridor that looked to me to be 80 yards, 85 yards long in the interior of that building. Am I incorrect in making that assumption?
It's a little bit shorter than that.
What do you say, 70 feet, 70 yards?
We can take a look at it.
Well, when we get to that, why don't we address that interior corridor and whether that's appropriate? Yes, ma'am.
You know, we have done a market study for the site, and there are apartment buildings within 5 miles. I don't really think that that's what your question is. I think your question is how...
Apartment buildings that are
as-
100 yards long?
Your question was answered by Gary, which is that although when you look at the apartments from the outside, the facades are staggered, and that's what he's trying to depict here. So,
Well,
I
I
think
understand what the
let's stick to the
architect...
architectural detail and let's see if we can get Gary to finish his.
Maybe I can ask the questions that I prefer to ask and not ask you to direct me how to ask my questions.
That's not my intention. If you're looking for other apartment buildings,
Right,
then
they're
we're
100 yards
obligated to
long that have...
provide that to you.
No, you're not obligated to do anything. I would assume that as part of good planning, you try to consider whether there are similar buildings that are site appropriate. And if there are, I'd like to see them. I haven't. I'm not the architect. And I really like to know whether the reason for doing that is just the economics of the project. If you're going to put, whatever it is, 25 affordable housing units there, then you need 90 units. And the only way you can feasibly do 90 units is do a 30-unit building and a 60-unit building. Otherwise, you do a cluster development, and you wouldn't have enough apartments in order to make the project economically feasible. If that's the reason for it, that's fine. If you're suggesting that that building is a good architectural and good planning practice, then boy, I'd like to see more evidence of that, and I'd like to see where these buildings are, because I frankly haven't seen them. They're that big.
Okay.
Okay, so why don't you proceed?
All right. So we've looked at the village view. This drawing responds to some of the questions you had, Mr. Chair, about building height, visibility, so on, et cetera. So just to begin, the top half of this drawing shows the more like construction sections through the building, schematic construction sections. The building on the west has the garage under and 3 residential levels above the garage, and then a roof structure, a sloped roof structure. So on the west side of the west building, we have three stories exposed, and on the east side of the same building, there's 4 floors. So the garage level is slightly just below grade here, but there's essentially a level of garage providing like a podium for the building, and then the 3 residential floors above it. So on the left side, it's 3 stories. This first floor level is 10 feet lower than the land above it. It's very hard to see in this drawing, but this little guy here is the same as the big guy.
Yep.
So this floor, the first floor level, is 10 feet lower than the grade of the property line. So the first floor is kind of submerged in that
I need to
respect.
go back to that other plan. But could you go back to the other plan
Sure.
and show us where those sections are? Just draw that section,
Yeah.
so that we can see where it is in plan?
So roughly,
Understood,
yeah, the section through here,
yeah. That's what you're calling the west building.
that's the west building.
Yeah.
This is the west property line here.
The section, draw that again?
Right.
And that's looking north?
Approximately, right. That's looking north.
Yeah.
Yeah. Similar, the other section is through the center, pretty much the middle of that building,
Yeah,
looking north.
okay, thank you.
Wrong way. Okay. So between the two buildings.
On the west building, on the east side of the west building, where you've got the, you said there was like a podium.
Yes.
It's not gonna look like a garage, right? It's somehow masked?
There'll be landscaping in front of it, and we've chosen some materials that we think will be, it's not a concrete structure. You won't be seeing any concrete. Okay. The other building, the west building, is similar. It's 3 stories on the west side and 4 stories on the east side. There's garage below as well, the 3 levels of residential, and sloped roofs as well. This roof has a shape to it, and the reason for that shape, being flat on top, is so we can put what's normally you see in a lot of multifamily residential projects, all the air conditioners on the ground outside of the apartments. We don't think that's a good use of the landscape. We'd rather landscape around the apartments. So we've put all those condenser units up, hidden in the roof structure itself.
Is that just for that building or for the both?
The other building has a similar setup. It's slightly different, and I have another slide that will show exactly where those that equipment is.
But they're not exposed to public view as well?
No, they're
Is that
screened up on the roof,
Thank you.
with roof screens.
Great.
Okay, so we've got our 2 buildings together. There's a plateau between the 2 buildings, roughly level where the parking is, and the grade drops off sharply off the back of the east building. This is the property line for the residences. It's about 227 feet from our building to the the property line behind the residences on Randolph Avenue. We're about 50 feet and more from the corner of the east building to the west property line. Okay.
And now it says no disturbance zone. Is that the wetlands area? Is
Yes.
that what's going on there?
Yes.
And those trees stay?
Everything that's,
Anything within 25 feet of the wetlands is, nothing's touched. I think that's actually like a law.
So the east wall on the east side, on the east building, that's gonna be pretty high. What's the dimension?
that foundation wall does get about to be 10 feet high
Just 10?
in
It
this,
looks bigger than that.
yeah,
that
in the
section.
back there.
Yeah.
The elevation here is between, I believe it's about elevation 120,
Yeah.
and the garage floor is about elevation 130.
And what's the elevation of the first floor?
The elevation of the first floor, I'll have to look, but I believe it's about elevation 140,
138?
138. Do you see that?
We're trying to get an idea how big that wall is.
Yes.
And is that going to be artificially screened, or I see the tree in the bottom section? Is that suggesting a landscape treatment, or will it be screened with the natural vegetation from the wetland and the tree area?
Sure, it's going to be a combination of the two. I'm trying to get back to our friend, this plan here. So all this area here, the dash line, here's the east wall, the east building that we're talking about. So this line, this heavy dashed line, is the line of no disturbance in the wetlands area. So basically, we're very limited in what we can do there, if anything. So this piece of property here, Jim, you may want to correct me on, part of this is being used for replication of the wetlands.
Yeah, I think it's more detailed in the grading plan. You can kind of see the contours.
But currently, this is all wooded. This is all wooded here.
That's the wetland.
That's the wetlands.
I have a question for you. Does the buffer zone is what is that, a foot away from the building or something like that? It's very close.
Yeah, we're outside of the buffer zone with the building.
Does that mean that people who are inhabiting the building cannot walk around the easterly portion of the building? In other words, does the buffer zone preclude that? Or can they walk in the buffer zone?
Yes.
Use it for access or whatever reason. They certainly can't play in it or disturb it, but
It's not really practical. I don't know what the
Is it
laws are. Is that what you're saying? Is there like a law that you can't walk?
yeah,
through
is that wet? If I walked out a foot off the building, is that all wetlands? I mean, that's really wet as opposed to.
The wetland side.
Sorry. The buffer zones are just demarcate jurisdictional resource areas around those wetlands. So the wetland itself is wet, but those buffer zones are typical upland. In this instance, the buffer zones are forested.
Okay, so
Just
can
typical
you walk
forest.
in the buffer
You can-
zone
you can
without
walk
violating wetlands laws?
Yes.
Or kids could play in the buffer zone?
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you, that's great.
All right, I think I've finished my discussion on this slide here. If we can move on to the next one.
But before you get off, on the east building, those roof treatments, that's completely hidden.
On the east building, the roof treatments, you mean the mechanical equipment
Yeah.
up on the roof? Yes.
Thank you.
Okay.
They'll be concealed on both buildings.
Yeah, thank you.
So getting more into the detail of the buildings, this is the footprint or the basement garage level.
I'm sorry, can I ask you a question that pops into my mind? I realize that on the westerly building, the air conditioning vents and equipment, whatever else you have up there is screened. But is noise from those air conditioning units or ventilating systems, it's going to be noticeable on adjacent properties that are on the western side? In other words, did you do a study, or does a study exist, or are there formulas that you can use to determine that basically the noise from the ventilating system is going to stay within the site and not adversely affect one of the neighbors on the west who may be out sitting by his pool, for example?
I don't actually know the answer to that.
We can get decibel levels from the machines themselves, and
Yes. Would you expect, knowing where that westerly building is and knowing where the residences on the west are, that they would not have any serious noise intrusion onto their property? Or is that a study you want to undertake?
that's something I think we need more data to give you a proper answer for.
Okay.
I don't want to.
I don't want you to guess either.
Yes, yeah.
I didn't know whether that was considered as part of this. Maybe that's something that's part of the more, it's not conceptual, it's part of the actual development of the buildings. But I'd like to know the answer to that.
Sure. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, sticking with the garage plan, just so we have an understanding of what goes on in the garage, not much except for the parking. There are 54 cars in the east building. all on the ground, all enclosed, not visible. All the walls enclose the garage completely. There's an entrance door on the left here. People come in the park. There's a elevator. These buildings are all accessible, so if you park in the garage, you can take the elevator up to your floor.
Is that the only elevator in this building?
That's correct, yes.
And is there an architectural reason for that? Because it seemed to me, when I was looking at this plan, it seemed to me if I had one of the apartments on the very left-hand side of the building, and I was carrying my Christmas presents or my groceries or something, I'd have quite a long hall there.
Right, yes.
So I would assume that most people would put the elevator in a central location, but there must be a good reason why you didn't do it.
Yes. A lot of it has to do with topography. The topography drops off down the other end of the building. It would be very difficult to get a wheelchair into the building in that situation. So this was it doesn't serve everybody equally well, but it seems to serve most of the population of the building adequately. And then other people may choose to go up the stairs.
So is that one elevator, or are there two elevators?
It's one elevator per building for 60 apartments, yes.
Is there some type of regulation as to how many units that one elevator can conveniently handle?
Yeah, there's something called level of service. Wait time, you've all experienced it. If you've gone up a building, you wait for the elevator, and what's tolerable and what's not tolerable.
So what's the level of service for this elevator estimated to be?
I don't have that information tonight, but I can get that to you.
But did the applicant seriously consider a second elevator, or was it just an issue of losing apartments? Or I think elevators are expensive, and maybe that's an expense you didn't want to endure.
No, we think this is appropriate for the size building, the number of units, the number of floors.
Okay, but you're going to do a quick study or a quick and dirty study and tell us that that's adequate, or are you not?
It's sure. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
It just seemed to me if you have one elevator with 30, you should perhaps have two elevators for 60. But that may be intuitive, and it may not be engineering science at all.
Now, we've done all different kinds of projects, and some may have 70 apartments with one elevator, and sometimes we'll have two elevators. It depends on the project, depends on the terrain, it depends on a number of factors.
Whether you have an older clientele or a younger clientele, the younger kids maybe can walk up, be a little more active than the older folk.
Right. But we do have the stairs for those active types. These two areas here, so if you live on the first floor, you could walk up the stairs in lieu of the elevators. The other thing we have going in the garages is the trash management. So all the trash management is within the buildings. There's no trash dumpsters outside of the buildings.
That's intentional.
That's very intentional. The way it works is trash will be collected in carts. The carts will be wheeled out to the garage entrance, and trash pickup will occur at the entrances to each garage door. That's about it in the garages. There's space for bicycle parking that will be provided.
I'm sorry, on that trash.
Yeah, go ahead, Jeff.
Okay.
No, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, where is the trash collected in the building? Is there a
There's a trash chute that terminates in this room right there.
So
if you're on the upper floor and you have trash, you bring it to the trash room. There's a chute, you open the door, you put your trash bag in, and it falls down to the lowest level.
Is there one chute in this building, or are there
There's
multiple
only one
chutes?
chute, yes.
I'm sorry, one chute. One chute.
Chute per building.
Can I ask you why you wouldn't have more chutes? I mean, this isn't a big issue, but it seems
Yes.
if I had an apartment on the left-hand side of the building, that's a long walk. That may be a 50-yard walk to the chute, maybe longer.
Yes, if you go into the elevator, it would seem to be convenient to bring the trash to have the trash chute located next to the elevator.
So everything goes down the chute, and where is it collected on the ground floor?
Yes, it's collected in this room in carts, wheeled carts that are rolled out to the garage
And
door.
the size of that room is approximately? I know that's not the scale, but just a ballpark.
Let's say it's 10 by 20 approximately.
Does that sound adequate to take care of all of the trash for 60?
Yeah, I mean, you'd get a contract set up, and depending on like the volume, they might come twice a week. You know,
Okay, so-
whatever they come in, grab the barrels. Yeah, and it'd be something that you'd probably have to. The on-site maintenance person might have to monitor that, but I think that's kind of something you got to
Okay,
figure
so
out.
the
what
trash
to do.
contractor would park the trash truck outside the building somewhere. Where would they park? You know?
Probably, I'm guessing maybe near the garage.
On the
door.
left-hand side? Is that right? On the left-hand side of the building?
That's where the garage
Yes, sir.
door is, yeah, there's
So
one
the-
garage door here.
They'd park there?
Yes.
They wouldn't bring the truck inside?
No, no.
No. And so you'd have to haul the trash for 60 units all the way to the end of the building?
Right,
Yeah.
yeah.
And that's normally,
That's pretty standard.
it's
yeah.
pretty standard, okay.
Yeah.
And they would,
They're tough
in
guys. They can-
dumpsters or little dumpsters?
It's
or
like
what are they?
wheel dollies, wheel big carts.
Sure,
So that's the trash. What about the recycling?
same thing.
The same chute?
No, we can't put it down the same chute, we can't mix.
You only have
recyclables
one
and
chute.
trash. Right, so recycling will either be handled with recycling separately, with recycling at each floor level, and recycling bins. Or it would be, essentially, that's the approach we're taking here for this project.
I think you could have more recycling than trash.
I think you're right, yeah.
I don't know about that. I mean, that just seems, I don't know. But on the, so that was one question, maybe we'll come back to that. And on the truck, you're talking about a contracted pickup service for both the recycling and the trash. It would get a sense, it would actually help to have an idea of how many, the frequency of that from a perspective of traffic off of Randolph Avenue. I mean, if that's once a day, but maybe you don't think it is, maybe it's less, even less than that. But we should expect garbage trucks to be taking a left if they're going north on Randolph Ave into the site, and a right if they're coming south, a couple of times a week.
A couple of times a week.
Garbage, and these would be trucks that would be, what size would they be?
I think they have all kinds of size vehicles that they send an appropriate one for this particular
Yeah.
site. They're not all like the ones you see going through neighborhoods.
Okay. But regardless, it's not going to be a town-sponsored activity.
No.
You're not going to have town pickup. Okay. Thank you.
Could I ask you one question about the parking spaces? Are the parking spaces that are shown on this plan, are they all uniform size, or are they of different sizes?
They're, each parking space is 9 feet by 18 feet. For the most part, there might be a couple that are larger than that because of the space. And then we've got accessible parking spaces that are 8 feet by 18 feet with an 8-foot aisle between the two of them.
And are those typical parking dimensions
Yes,
for a building of a residential building of this size?
yes.
Thank you.
Okay.
Sure. Yes, please. Do you remember where you are?
Yeah, well.
No, if you don't, we'll forgive you. Don't worry about it. Yes, sir. You want to? No, Mr. Mullen is kidding us. Why don't you proceed?
So this is the first floor plan of the same building above the garage level. This is the front door. We've got a kind of like a farmer's porch entrance here, covered entryway, coming up to the front vestibule. Adjacent to the vestibule is a mail area where residents can pick up their mail and delivery takes place in this space here. The main elevator, main lobby is out front here. And there's a leasing office, management office, right up front where everybody can see it coming in the front door. The amenity spaces that we spoke about earlier are in this area of the building, facing what we like to call the common area between the two buildings. So it's a combination of fitness. There's a fitness area in the back, and there's a club space, which is like a lounge area, living room, large living room type of space residents can relax in. There are some bathrooms associated with that. The balance of the floor is all residential apartments, essentially 2-bedroom and 3-bedrooms on the ends in the corners, and mostly 1-bedrooms along the length of the building. The 1-bedrooms, as Lynn mentioned are approximately 760 square feet. The 2 bedrooms about 1,100 square feet, and the 3 bedrooms approximately 1,380 square feet. What is slightly gray in this plan here are the locations of the affordable units. So this entire floor has, let's see, 36, about 18 apartments. So there are 6 affordable apartments on this floor. Now, with the affordable units, from the outside of the building or the walking down the corridors, you can't tell which apartment is affordable, which isn't. They look exactly the same from their front door and on the exterior of the building. Interior, there could be some changes, but on the outside, they're going to look like any other apartment in the building. Okay.
Yes, I have a question.
I'm sorry, but you can't designate the affordable units. They have to float. You always have to have 25% affordable units in a comprehensive permit project. If this was a different kind of project, you could designate affordable units, but these cannot. I've already checked with DHCD, and so you can't segregate these specific units as affordable units. They all have to be available. As people become income eligible in one of these units, you just don't throw them out. You then have to have the next available unit has to be provided to an affordable renter. So these color designations cannot be happening.
Okay. We had to show affordable units, some, at least designate that we've got 6 per floor, and they're proportionate to the number of 1s and 2s and 3 bedroom units.
We did that for purposes of mass housing. We were asked to do it. If we need to do something differently, then we will certainly take a look at that, and we appreciate your input.
Yeah, I mean, you know full well that we're gonna have to have a restriction that's gonna say that these units are gonna float. So if that's gonna change the numbers because you are not gonna do the same interiors for these units, that won't work. You're gonna have to have the same interior for all of the units, because any one of them could become an affordable unit if somebody is not income eligible. So if you were planning on saving money by making sure they look fine from the outside, but they had different finishes in the inside, that's not gonna work.
We absolutely appreciate your comment. We were more interested in showing that we were scattering the affordable units throughout the building, because it was our understanding that with regard that you can't put all of the affordable units in one building. They need to be scattered throughout the building. So this was an illustration, and we will certainly have heard your point loud and clear, and we'll get back to you on how that's going to be
Well,
handled.
why don't you get back to the board, please? Attorney
Exactly.
O'Donnell is asking a question, which is a legitimate question, and
Right.
thank you for your questions. You've usurped my questions. But
I
when,
apologize.
but that would obviously get the information back to the board. I mean, thank you for your questions. Why don't you continue? But that was the question that actually popped into my mind.
Fair enough.
I didn't know whether there was going to be a distinct difference, if any, between the affordables.
I don't anticipate any difference.
Okay.
Why don't you proceed?
Great, okay. So relative to this floor, I think we talked about the amenity spaces, the apartments, the locations of the apartments. The only thing left to say about the building is it's fully accessible in terms of handicap accessibility. We've got the parking spaces at the front entrances. It's an elevator building. The whole building is set up for accessibility. So 5% of the apartments will be fully accessible. The Group 2A, according to Massachusetts Architectural Access Board regulations, and the balance of the
What do you
units.
mean by fully accessible?
When we say fully accessible, it means that they can be adapted for a person in a wheelchair to maneuver around throughout. So the bathrooms are larger. All the doors in all the apartments are 3 feet, or at least 3 feet wide to gain access into, but the kitchens are modified slightly to meet the needs of the people who have those needs. So that might be adjustable countertops. In the case of the kitchens, there's a wall oven instead of a oven underneath the stove kind of thing. The grab bars are not installed in the bathrooms until requested, but the blocking for the grab bars are provided in all the apartments. So those kinds of things.
Do the handicapped accessible regulations somehow limit the distance from a handicapped apartment to an elevator so that it can't be 75 yards to the elevator if you're in a wheelchair, or it has to be like 40 or 50 or 30 yards, and you kind of take the handicapped accessible units and get them closer to the elevator? Because they
Good
can't
point.
use the
I'll
stairs.
look into that, not that I know of.
I don't know either, that's
It
why I'm
makes-
just
it makes
asking.
sense,
It makes sense to me not to have a handicapped person at the far left side of this building. It would seem to be burdensome, but who knows?
Yeah, right.
Okay.
Okay.
So why don't you continue with your...
Yeah. All right, so the upper floors are basically...
I'm sorry, before we get off one, I'm having trouble following, maybe because mine is a little blurry, but all of these units have to be entered through the central door?
Through the front...
The front door, there's no outside access for any of these first unit?
There are not. All the apartments are accessed by this corridor. And you mentioned before, is it 85 yards long? No, I don't believe it is, but it's broken up into segments. But your front door is off that, what we call the central corridor. And it's
Is there two doors?
there is another door that you can access the building in right
Is it
here.
like key or something?
It could be key or
Yeah.
fob
And you
access.
go in and out that way?
Good.
That's the way to go in and out?
It could be, yeah.
Yeah, and do the units have any outdoor space associated with them?
Just the decks and balconies.
And what are those like?
They're, okay.
Actually, you probably showed us photos, I wasn't paying attention.
Well, on the exterior of the building, they're like
Do
that.
each of them have one of those?
Yeah, almost all the apartments, there are several that do not. The inside corner of the building, it's not feasible to put decks there, but I'd say 95% of the apartments have decks.
And do all the 3 bedrooms have decks? Those happen to be in the corners.
Yeah, the inside corner I'm talking about, we'll go back to this guy, is really this location.
That one doesn't have a deck. Okay. Thank you.
Can I ask you a question here? In terms of access to and from the building, you have 2 access points, one the main door and the other one on the far left.
Actually 3, right?
3. Where's the third?
Well,
they're
On the
on
north
right-hand
side.
that right-hand side is
Okay.
really, that's an emergency egress stair,
That's emergency.
so it's egress only, yes.
Now, let me just pose a horrible thought, and that is the building is on fire.
Yes.
And let's assume I don't know whether that's north or east or west, but that the area where the primary exits are on fire. The only access you'd have is that one little one? There's nothing to the rear? There's no emergency
So we've got-
to the rear?
Yeah, we've got, first of all, it's a fully sprinklered building.
Yep.
Secondly, we've got 2 emergency stairs, one here, one in that location. So if you have an issue with a fire here, you can go out that way, or you can go out that way.
Which way? I'm sorry, you moved
There's
your...
a stair, a door to the stair
Where do you
here.
go?
That brings you down, this brings you outside.
Yep.
And the other one brings you down, not
Oh.
through the garage, but down to the garage level and then
And
out.
then you'd exit the main entrance to the garage?
Yes.
But you don't provide any other type of exit to the, what I'll call the lower part of this building?
no.
Even though it may be near the wetlands or anything
Right,
like that?
right. No, we do not.
It just, I'm not an architect, but it kind of troubles me if there was a fire on that side of the building. You're not going to use the elevators that they shut down in fires.
You don't want
How
to use
you'd get-
elevation fire.
How you'd get handicapped people out of this building?
Right. We're a sprinkler building.
You'd have to carry them out, I would think. I know you're a sprinkler building,
Right.
but this may conform with every fire code known to man. I just don't know. It just seems to me that if there was an emergency event, whatever it may be, on that upper side of the building, that ingress and egress to this building is severely limited, and for handicapped people, it may be, they have to wait out the storm.
No different than any handicap apartment in a 10-story high-rise building. I mean, you basically have those opportunities to get out the same way, except in a 10-story building, you would have the elevator accessible.
Right.
But any building less than a high-rise building, you've got emergency exit stairs to exit the building.
Okay, thank you. Why don't you proceed?
Yeah, I just want to add, unfortunately, because Jim Burke is not here, I do believe he has had meetings with the fire department, and maybe we can come back to that issue at our next meeting when he's here.
Okay, and I understand that the representatives of the fire department are supposed to speak to us at some point in time, so that may be helpful as well. And we don't want to impose engineering onto architectural skills, so forgive us if we're asking questions that are beyond your specific expertise.
That's not a problem at all.
Why don't you proceed with your presentation?
So the floor above, the 2 floors above, there are 3 residential levels. So the first floor we looked at, the second 2 levels, 2 and 3, are essentially the same. And these only have apartments on them. There's no amenity spaces. So we've got the central corridor, we have a central lobby, and access to all the apartments. So there are 18 apartments per floor, and with a mix of 1s, 2s, and 3s on each floor level.
I've got a question. It's probably a stupid question, but in terms of the affordable units here, I think you told us that your plan was going to be for 23 affordable units, 23 out of the 90.
Correct.
And how do they get mixed in terms of, do you have most of your affordable, are they 1 and 2 bedrooms, or do you do a percentage for each style of unit?
We did 25% of each style unit.
Okay. So it's equitably spread among the mix.
Right, and the statute provides that we need to provide at least 10% of the units as 3 bedrooms
Thank you.
of the overall project.
So you've got the type of equitable allocation that the affordable housing statute requires in this apartment mix, to the best of your knowledge and belief.
So.
Otherwise, Mr. Caggiano would tell you to change your mix. Okay, why don't you proceed, sir?
Okay. I just want to clear up, I think I just said there's 18 units per floor. It's only 18 units on the first floor. There's 21 apartments on the upper 2 floors each. There's a total of 18 affordable units in this building, and the balance of the affordable apartments will be in the west building, as we call it. So what are the apartments like? Well, we mentioned the unit size.
Sorry, 18 units out of the 23 are in this large building?
Correct.
Why is that so?
Once again, it's 25% of 90,
Yep.
and 25% of 30. It's
Okay.
not perfect math, but that's...
But it's close?
Yeah.
Okay, so it's not you're not disproportionately putting low-income folks into the bigger building and higher-income folks into the smaller, more elite building, or fancier building, or more private building?
No.
Okay.
No, it's
The ratios work?
It's just a math, it's just
Okay.
a math thing. Right.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
So each of the apartments, as I think earlier was mentioned, they're self-contained, fully appliance kitchens, washer dryers. They have balconies for the most part, with access out to the apartments with doors. There's large windows. The light is very important for us. And we've got 9-foot-high ceilings, so there's a sense of space within these apartments. Moving on to the next slide. Just talking about the exterior materials and the elevations of the building. So this is once again the east building, the east building, the west view of it. Okay, so this is the front door, basically, we talked about where everybody goes into this building, and the secondary door here. But the idea in this building is to create, this village effect by using the architecture to put the building together with pieces, so that what looks like a house with a roof is distinguished by another piece, another piece, and another piece. So they're individual shapes and forms. And it is hard to see in this drawing because it's a two-dimensional drawing, but this piece on the left comes out towards us. This piece on the right comes out a bit towards us, and the two pieces in the center are in the middle. So we have some variation in the surface of the building to help us out with making these shapes that feel more village-like. And then the roof forms also define these as well. Between this typical shape here has 2 apartments, and the balconies are in between these projecting bays and pavilions. They are traditional double-hung windows in most of the apartments. In the bays, a similar thing. We wanted to layer this building, and we looked a little bit for inspiration. What we wanted to do is layer the building like a cake, layer cake in terms of materials. So the bottom of the building, where these elements project out, and it's much harder to see in this than that picture that was up there, but the village view, is that we've got stone on the bottom, a veneer stone, a field stone, which is a good durable surface for the bottom. And then on the upper levels, we have a residential clapboard type siding, and then a more paneled look on the bays, and then conventional roof shingles, asphalt roof shingles on the sloped roof surfaces. So this is the building that's got the mechanical equipment up on the roof. So you can see how these roofs effectively screen it. And in between these roofs, we have like a balustrade that also will help us to screen the rooftop equipment. So on this side of the east building, this is the west side of the east building, it's 3 stories. And you can see on this other view, which is an end view, which is this end of the building, it's the west side is here, this is the east side. So it's 3 stories on the west side and 4 stories on the east side. And the grade slopes about 20 feet from this side of the building down to the back of the building here. Okay?
So is a stone band, is that uniform throughout the entire elevation?
No, wherever the building projects out, so let's say anything that has a pediment on it, that triangular roof shape, that's got stone at the bottom.
It's a veneer?
It's a veneer stone.
And otherwise at the bottom, what is it?
That's a siding material, it's a different color.
Similar to the clapboarding?
Yes.
Is it actually like is it the same as the clapboarding?
Clapboarding, but a different color.
And can you talk a little bit about the color?
Well,
we saw the village, don't go back. We saw the village view, but that was like a brown, is that what?
Well, the color will be developed as we go along, and I think, initially our intent was the bottom color would be similar to the stone color, so brownish.
Regardless of material?
Yes. And then the upper color would be, complementary to that, in the same, let's say, color hue, but a different tone, so it'd be lighter, a lighter color. And then these bays that, with the smaller roofs on it would be, let's call it white.
And would the stone be white too?
No, the stone would be stone colored, a field stone color, kind of brownish gray.
At some point in this hearing, would you be presenting a rendering that would show what you think the color would be? Or is that what you're not thinking that?
Well, if I showed you this again, would you?
Oh, is that it?
That's essentially the color concept we have for right
Okay.
now. Okay. The west building is smaller, it's 30 apartments. There are 10 apartments per floor, so it's equally the same amount on each of the 3 levels. Once again, it's a combination of ones twos, and three-bedroom apartments. I mentioned that there's 5 affordable units in this building. The layouts are very similar. It's just a smaller building. This building also has a parking garage completely enclosed in the basement level. There's 29 cars in this parking. It also has similar provisions for the trash management. And on this side of the building, the entrance is right here. So you walk into the building actually at the garage level, but when you walk into the lobby, you don't feel like you're walking into a garage. You feel like you're walking into a nicely furnished lobby with nice finishes. And take the elevator up, as in the other building, to the upper floors. So this building is also accessible for handicap use.
What about the bikes?
The bikes, we've got areas that haven't actually been defined for bike storage, but these striped areas that aren't used, we can't park there, we can't drive there. There's some others here that we anticipate providing some bike storage racks in those locations. This is all 4 elevations of the west building. So let's go through them individually. The west side of the west building, so that's facing the west property line, the back property line, is 3 stories high. The other side, facing the east, is 4 stories high. And this is the garage level here. And you had a question about the material. This is all going to be that same veneer fieldstone material on the bottom level. Then there'll be planting in front of it. Some of these bays come down to the ground. The main entrance is in this location. And on the roof, there are areas behind which we've located the mechanical equipment. So these screened areas are where that equipment would be. This shows the garage entrance. So you're entering the building. It's a 18-foot wide garage door, and cars enter and exit through that entrance. The residences will have some sort of device to open and close the doors, whether it's a card reader or a fob or clicker. That hasn't been decided yet.
So there's one entrance to each garage, is that right?
That's correct, yes.
Okay, and there's no requirement that there be a secondary exit for automobiles?
Not for automobiles, no.
Isn't that the south elevation?
If this says west, it should say, you're exactly right, that should say south.
I was looking for that garage door around the back. I thought maybe you snuck a
No, I
fast one by
apologize.
us.
This says west, this says south, this is east, this says north, it should say west. So we need to correct this drawing. I apologize for that.
I'm glad that it's the labeling and you didn't move the garage.
We didn't twist the building around. All right. So finally, just want to end on this note. We just want to talk about the sustainability of the project and the energy resources. Milton, of course, is a stretch community. It's voted to adopt the Massachusetts Stretch Code via the Green Communities Act. And so there's a higher level of energy efficiency required for anything built in the town. So what are some of the energy measures we're looking at for this building? Some of them will be apparent from the outside, and some will not be apparent to anybody. But you know, we will use a higher quality level of window because we need to have a very high U value for those windows. All of heating appliances, water heaters, heating equipment will be high efficiency, higher than is required by the base building code. We'll have enhanced insulation in the walls and the roof and the ceilings. And the appliances will all be Energy Star appliances. So there'll be a significant savings in the electrical usage for the residents of this building. There'll be lighting controls and some of the corridors that will limit the duration of the lights being on during the day. And a lot of the, some of the other sustainable features are actually within the site. And I think this might be a good time to kind of segue you into the site discussion. If you have no further questions, I'm finished with the architectural presentation.
I just have one question, and it's just, I think it's a small question, but in one of the letters, I saw people were saying that this particular site doesn't have provision for snow plowing and storage of snow or piling of snow. How is that taken? Is that something that? Oh,
Mr. Jim.
I might be able to address that, and that's something that we can definitely
okay,
address.
we'll wait till you get to that. That's fine. Jenny, do you have any questions?
No.
Jeffrey? Okay, who's up next?
That's me. Okay.
Don't look so happy.
I got one ready. So my name's James DeSalle Jr. I'm a civil engineer at DeSalle Burke and Associates.
Good, welcome to the board, Mr. DeSalle.
Glad to join you. And so I've been working as a civil engineer there for about a year now, and the two, what do you call them, partners, Jim Burke and Jim DeSalle, they have more experience than I've been alive for, to put it
That's
easily.
fine. Are you a registered professional engineer?
I'm an engineer in training.
Great, okay.
So, but yeah. Okay, so I chose the fire access plan. It's also sort of the site plan too. So as we've already touched upon, there's the two buildings, the 30-unit building and the 60-unit building, and the parking lot. I kind of divided them. When I talk about them, I'll say that's the upper lot, that's kind of the middle lot, and that's the lower lot when I refer to them. The project is accessed by this access road. It's 24 feet wide with a 4-foot wide driveway. And all parking aisles are a minimum of 20 feet wide. So as you can see by this is a little fire truck design. And there's no problem with fire truck access when it comes to getting anywhere in this parking lot area or up the driveway.
But what if there was a fire and there happened to be 3 or 4 trucks? They could gain
They can follow
convenient
each other.
They'd follow each other, but they couldn't turn around.
The turnaround, it would depend. They'd either have to back up and turn around here, or if depending on who's parked where, they might be able to turn around here. But that would just depend on if.
How would they access the rear of the buildings? That seems to me to be an obvious question. Would they have access to the rear of the buildings?
From my understanding, they'd be able to either right here access there, or they could always just drive up onto here if need be to access the rear. But that's something that hasn't. I know Jim Burke had talked with the fire department, so he's probably better qualified to address that situation.
Yeah, I don't mean to pin you down. I know you're pinch hitting here, and it's an awkward thing.
Yeah,
But
from my understanding, that was their chief concern, was whether they could maneuver a fire truck through the parking lot to get to any point, which they can. They should be able to.
and do you think that the soils on the I'll call it the backside of both buildings would be adequate to support fire apparatus?
I don't know what the
You don't
soils
know
are
that.
like. I don't think we've done tests yet.
Okay.
So
Well, I think the
that's-
fire marshal is going to.
Yeah, that would be something that would definitely be addressed later.
Sure. Why don't you proceed?
All right. And then so also as you can see, there's the walkway to the recreational area. I believe we're proposing that it's gravelled. And it'll just follow the contours of the current site, and I believe it's 6 feet wide. And the reason why it comes down here and over is, as was mentioned, just to avoid the wetlands in here. So.
Can I ask you a silly question?
Yep.
On this access plan, which I think is a conceptual plan, it's not a construction plan.
No.
It shows this gray serpentine-like area.
Is it this?
No, I'll call it the area where the traffic, where the fire engines would go. Yeah, right there, where they're turning.
Yeah.
And then going up between the two buildings.
Yep.
That's just a conceptual track that you put on this plan.
Oh,
But
like you're
it's-
saying? Oh, yeah. That's just the track of what the fire truck would do to get up there, and it's just to show that it can make that turn and it's not going off the driveway or the parking lot area. It's a program it's called AutoTurn. It's a program in AutoCAD that
Okay.
generates that.
Okay, and is that, generally utilized for the purposes of determining the
Yeah, it's
proper
just shown
accessibility
to
the
outline
site?
the path the fire truck would take to
Yep.
get to that point right there. That's the fire truck right there,
Yep.
and that's just the pathway that it would take to get there.
And that doesn't make any difference what type of truck it is? It's just a standard fire truck?
It's
or
a standard fire truck.
Like a ladder? Would a ladder be able to do
It's a
this?
typical Astro fire truck. I can double check on that for you.
Okay.
But yeah, there's different vehicles, and that's just the standard fire truck. You can use.
So in terms of something happening, I shouldn't be doing this to you because it's putting you on an unfair spot. But if there was a fire in the middle, let's say the middle of the night, so that most of the parking spaces are filled, and presumably people aren't going to run out of their apartments and jump into their car and try to get off the site, the fire truck would have or several fire trucks would have a rather narrow path to get into these.
But the path doesn't cross over any of the spaces.
No, I noticed that.
So if every single space was full,
Yep.
the fire truck could still maneuver its way
Yep.
up there.
And
That wouldn't be an issue.
But there's no cul-de-sac or anything at the end of this. Why is that? Because you don't want to lose parking spaces? Or?
Well, a big issue is right here is the wetlands right here.
Yep.
So that would just become an issue with the buffer and whatnot. That's something I'm sure we could consider, but that's.
Well, this plan, this computerized plan that you utilize, does it provide or consider the turning of the fire trucks around? Or does if there were 3 or 4 fire trucks here, do they have to back out of the site in order to, or back to the corner of this building?
Right now, yeah, they'd have to back up to this point right here, and then go back out.
And same for,
I know that was something that Jim Burke had been talking to with the fire department.
and that's the same for ambulances and police cars and the like.
They would obviously have different paths. Fire truck's obviously a lot harder to maneuver than a smaller size ambulance or a police car.
Sure, but if you had I won't say catastrophic event, but you had an unfortunate event, there's a fire or an emergency there, you're going to have 3 or 4 fire trucks there, and you're probably going to have 2 or 3 police cruisers there, and you probably have 2 or 3 ambulances there. They're really going to get stacked in there pretty good, aren't they? Because they're coming spontaneously, it's not a
Like I
planned
said, that'd be
operation.
something I think Jim Burke would
Okay,
be
well, we'll ask him.
off answer.
When is he coming back?
He'll be back for the meeting next week, so I mean, he should.
He's coming back this weekend.
Oh, is he on a fancy Caribbean vacation or something?
Exactly.
He is. We got you. Where is he?
Aruba.
Oh, how nice. Well, we feel
They didn't invite me.
it was snowing a little bit when I came into this building, so give your dad our best. It sounds great. Why don't you continue with the presentation?
All right. Yes. Sorry, I just lost my train of thought.
Well, that's the purpose of my questions.
Yeah, right.
Don't worry, you're doing fine.
Yeah, I wanted to touch. I remember you had mentioned the sidewalks.
Yes, sir.
So yeah, there's the sidewalk. It's a 4-foot wide sidewalk coming up the access road.
Right. Some people said that's on the wrong side of the road because nobody's going to go out of this on foot and take a right and walk into the Blue Hills. That more often people will come down that sidewalk and take a left and go to church or go to the.
That's something that it wouldn't be a big deal to change in the concept. We're only in the planning phase. That's something that we could change.
Other
I think
people
that'd
have
be
said that 4-foot sidewalk is inadequate in width. Is
From
there
my
some standard?
understanding,
Is there a
it
standard
is.
as to the width?
From my understanding, it fits the standards. I don't have them in front of me, so I can't 100% confirm it.
Yeah.
But
Okay. Well,
from my understanding, it is sufficient.
And as you're walking across the heading to the entrance,
There's,
aren't there walls there? Did I see some drawing that had big walls on
Yeah,
either
I was
side?
going to touch on the grading.
Then why don't you go
plan.
on?
There are walls on
Okay.
both sides,
Let's
but they're
go.
on they're still sufficient. They're on the outside of one side of the street, on the other side, on the other side of the sidewalk.
Right, but they have the effect of tunneling you when you're walking on a 4-foot sidewalk with cars zipping by you at 20 or 30 miles an hour.
I don't think it'd be any more tunneling than if you just had a regular sidewalk, though.
Okay. You think people would feel the same at ease if they could see through the?
I don't think
I don't-
that'd be a big issue.
Why don't you go on?
I'm not following it, I'm sorry. So if you're halfway up the driveway and you had a cross-section, there'd be a wall, then a sidewalk, then the 24-foot of pavement, then another sidewalk,
Well,
then a
there's
wall?
There's a curb, but
A curb?
No, there's not. There's
There's no
so-
sidewalk on the north side?
Yes, that's correct.
But what is that, what is it at the end there where it connects up to the building? What's that? Yeah, that, yeah.
That's the wall.
Oh, that's the wall.
Yeah, in this rendering, it's kind of tough to see.
And
but
it's
the wall.
it's for grading
Yeah,
purposes?
it's for grading.
So there's
and
a wall-
also, because there's a, when I get into the utilities, there's a, I think it's a recharge system in here and an outlet control structure
Yeah.
here. So that was to,
So the cross-section would be a wall, then a curb, what, a Cape Cod berm curb? What kind of curb? Granite edge curb?
I don't know if
You
it,
don't know?
if it had been discussed. It could
Asphalt,
be-
24 feet of asphalt, another curb, 4-foot sidewalk, wall?
There's no
I don't
sidewalk
think
on
that,
the
no.
north. There's just a
No, on the
sidewalk.
south side.
On the south side, yeah.
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 So wall,
The wall,
curb, asphalt.
road, curb, sidewalk, wall.
Yeah. I don't think there is a standard on a driveway for a sidewalk. I mean, it's a driveway, you know? So, so, I don't know if we should treat the driveway as if it's a public way. It's, you know, I think it's more like what is reasonable to accommodate the foot traffic that people anticipate you'd have from Randolph Avenue.
Well, looking where the amenities are, there won't be any foot traffic. Everyone's going to be driving out of
No,
this place.
I just don't think you'll have a standard, that's all.
How
I
long,
think it should be on the other side, though. It's strict.
see from the large building, let's call it the southerly side, though it's probably the easterly side. How long is it if I wanted to walk from that building?
From here down to
Yeah,
here.
down to the Randolph
I
Avenue.
wrote that down. I believe it's about 250 feet, roughly. 200 to 250.
Okay. And that's to Randolph Avenue.
Yes.
Downhill.
Yeah, it slopes at, it's about 3%. It's not steep. And then so once you get up to here, we have a painted crosswalk to cross to the sidewalk that starts here and kind of follows the edge of the landscaping, and it crosses in
I'm
front
sorry,
of this
did you
building.
say handicap crosswalk?
It's just like a painted crosswalk, so that like people
Painted.
driving. I never. It's just a regular crosswalk, but it'll have like a ramp down, so it's handicapped.
Okay,
accessibility.
sure.
Um,
There's no stop sign there or anything, it's just,
no, I think
it's just slow down.
It's just hopefully people use their common sense. And then there's a sidewalk in front of here to the, I think there's building entrance here, and it basically the sidewalk just follows along the building, and then I think there's another entrance somewhere in here. I forget exactly where it is. And there's also another one of the painted crosswalks to cross here to get into the ramps in there. And there's a sidewalk that goes to the building entrance here and then into here. We hadn't put
So-
a sidewalk on the edge of here. We didn't anticipate there being a big issue with safety, but there's definitely space to put it in if that's something that needs to be considered. But yeah, for right now, the sidewalks stop, I think, about here and then about here. Alright, is it okay to go to the next slide? Or?
And is the back of the westerly side of the 30 apartment building, is that wetlands back there as well?
I do not think so.
Uplands.
It's upland? Okay. But is it level or is it very steep?
No, the grade's kind of, as you
I
travel
say,
away from Randolph Ave, the grade in general is going up.
Going
I
up.
don't have it with me.
So would you
I
say
have an
that,
existing conditions plan it shows the grading.
so that's really not usable for recreation
Grading
space
shows
or
the
anything back there?
Really?
So behind there, yeah, it's,
Oh, the total width.
it looks like it goes up about 20 feet per 2 feet. So every 20 feet horizontally, the elevation
goes up
increases
2
about
feet.
2 feet, give or take.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
What is that feature at the top the very
This?
westerly? No, yeah, what's the feature? No, the feature at the edge of the
retaining
driveway. You had said there's space for a sidewalk there.
Okay,
No, up at the
Up
top.
here?
Yeah, right there.
there's a retaining wall.
Oh, that's a
That
wall.
goes along there, and I think there's about 5 feet between
Yeah.
the curbing and
Yeah.
the wall.
Do you know how high that retaining wall is?
I think it ranges, I forget what the minimum is. I think it ranges up to 10 feet high,
The highest would be 10 feet?
I believe, roughly.
Is that the only retaining wall that's going to be built as part of this project? Or is there a
So
retaining wall to the rear there?
there's a little one right here,
Yep.
just to kind of help out with some of the grading, and because it's so the property line's so harsh right here, and then there's the 2 walls that just follow the access road.
How about
So
the back
there's-
retaining wall? How high is that?
This one,
Yes, sir.
I think it's maybe 2 feet. It's not a high wall at all.
It's small, okay.
Yeah, it's more so just to kind of help the transition the grades because of this portion right here. That's just the only issue that we had.
Back on that cross-section, I think it would help to understand that a little bit more. I think the whole width was 24 feet,
No, there's 24 feet for the road and then 4 feet for the
so
sidewalk.
28 feet for the driveway,
I
plus
forget
the
the
curbing
curb.
and the wall, whatever space the wall comes up.
Like
Okay,
29 or something like that.
fine. So
plus
it's
the
2
wall.
12-foot lanes.
Yeah. So going on to the grading plan. So I guess I kind of already talked about the walls, and it's kind of tough to see on the slide. I know that we gave in the submission package there should be plans as well that have this on a blown up scale. But yeah, as I've said, the driveway slopes up at about 3%. Once we get into this lower parking area, it's at anywhere from 5 to 8%, no more than 8%, just to get the elevations up into the garage level for building 1 and to get up into this middle and upper parking area. And once we get into here, grading's held at no more than 2%, which is compliant with ADA for just handicap accessibility. And then the only thing to note is that once you get in this walk area, just because of the grading, there's an elevated walk that's it's handicap. It's basically a handicap ramp that's going to be, I think, maybe 2 feet above this little grass area that goes into the building. So there'd obviously be a handrail or something so that people don't fall off of that. And then, as I've said with the recreation area, this will just be gravelled. The grading won't change, so just to minimize disturbance for that. And then I've touched on the walls. So as you can see, just the walls, it's just the issue of just not being able to carry these grades evenly over. So we just kind of had to shift some of the grading over here with that wall. So that's why that wall's up there. All right, so and then on the utility plan, so what we are doing is this is the sewer line, and I believe water, and then gas falls to the left of the sewer, up from the existing mains on Randolph Avenue. They'll fall off the access road through the middle or lower parking area, and then they'll go into the building 1 and building 2. 10 feet will be maintained between the sewer and water lines. And the water line will be brought as it enters the building, split into 2, 1 fire and 1 domestic. And then there was a flow test done for the hydrant. I believe it's right there in front of building numbers 711 on Randolph Ave. And it found the flow to be at 1,440 gallons per minute. And so we see that as more than sufficient capacity for the project. And then dealing with the stormwater and stormwater management, the yellow tubes and squares are recharge chambers. And so it's tough to see on the plan from this distance, but there are catch basins, some here, some down here, some in here, and then also on the bottom of the access road that will collect all the impervious stormwater runoff. They'll channel it into the recharge systems, and in the case of the access road, into a CDS unit, which is just a water quality unit. Here and between the catch basins and the recharge systems and the water quality units, the water is treated. And then from here, it'll be funneled either into the wetland here or into an outlet control structure, which then channels it just past the wall, which will drain into the wetland. The outlet control structure is just to control the different peak flow rates for the different storm water events to comply with the 10 different standards set forth by the DEP. And that's pretty much it for that.
Do you know why the water service wasn't looped? There's been some comments in some of the materials that I read that said that that's an appropriate way.
That's something I haven't seen, so I guess Jim Burke would be better equipped to answer that question.
Or the water for fire purposes being just going in a straight line and being blunted. I've forgotten the expression. I'll get it later tonight, but that somehow puts undue pressure on the water pipes. You didn't deal with that issue.
Yeah, that was something I hadn't.
We'll deal with.
I'll pass that on to
Mr. Jim
Burke.
Burke on that. Any other questions of Mr. DeSalle?
We just have a letter from Mr. Lynch, and I can send it to you if you don't.
Okay, yeah, that'd be fine. I don't know, he might already have it, or I don't know if one of you guys already
Letter
has
from
it.
Mr. Lynch.
I think Mr. Caggiano has it.
From the DPW.
Oh, yes,
Yeah.
okay, yep.
Okay.
And that was just given to me.
Oh.
Does the utility configuration comply with the Mass Stormwater Policy Manual?
Yeah, that's why I had mentioned the 10 feet between the sewer and water. That's one of the requirements that they.
Does the project in general comply with?
Oh, yeah, and then for stormwater drainage as well, we went through all the standards and it complies. There's the peak flow rates are there's the post-development peak flow rates do not exceed the pre-development, and the TSS removal, and I forget all the other standards. Yeah, the recharge volume requirement.
Yes or no?
Yeah, okay, sorry.
Yeah,
They do.
fair enough. Thank you.
Okay, Ginny? No? Thank you very much. We appreciate your substituting.
All right, I think I'm done.
Under awkward
No, I'll pass
circumstances.
it
You
on.
should be in Aruba rather than.
I know, right?
Now, do we have Mr. Dulaski?
Yep.
Yes, sir.
Can I just raise a procedural question?
Absolutely.
I'm mindful of the hour and the chairman's comment about breaking at 10. The comments that I'd like to make to the board whenever you see fit, Mr. Chairman, relate to this evening's hearing. In other words, what I would like to suggest to the board requires your action within 15 days of tonight. So I would only ask that I be allowed to speak whenever the chairman allows me to speak, but I'm mindful of the hour.
How long do you need, Mr. Whitten?
About 4 minutes.
That's great. It's now 9:55. Dr. Dulaski, how long do you anticipate being in your direct presentation?
Yeah, with or without questions, right? I'd say 5 to 7 minutes.
Okay, so we'll get you in, Mr. Whitten. Absolutely. Welcome to the Board of Appeals.
Good evening, thank
We're
you. for having
delighted to hear from you.
Citizens, guests, members of the board, and Mr. Chair, thank you, and thank you for the earlier compliment. Daniel Dulaski, and I am a consultant with DeSalle Burke. And so earlier when you asked about my signature on the traffic study, it's because I'm a consultant with DeSalle Burke.
Right, but DeSalle Burke didn't sign the traffic study either.
That's right.
Nobody signed it.
Understood.
It just had a label on
So
it.
if you need a stamp, I'm a registered professional engineer in the state of Massachusetts.
Yes, great.
I've been practicing professionally for over 20 years now. So what I'd like to do is give you an overview in terms of the traffic study, start globally in terms of what we looked at, what I looked at, and then get down into the proposed site and some of the details. The traffic study has been submitted to the board. The fine details are in there. I'm not going to get into all of those tonight, but what I want to do is talk about the general approach. One thing I will throw out early is that everything that was done in the report was done within industry standards. So whether it's Mass DOT or the Institute of Transportation Engineers, in terms of conducting traffic reports, those were followed. So when you look at the study area and when we talk about traffic, everybody talks about, and we'll continue to talk about, the two intersections north of the site, Reedsdale Road at Route 28, and south of the site you've got Reed Street and the access road at Route 28, both signalized intersections. And in a little while you'll understand why those benefit this site, those signalized intersections. And then about halfway, or I guess 2/3 down the road from Reedsdale Road, you have the proposed site. And so what I did is looked at the two signalized intersections. We looked at performance today, and we look at a growth factor. So we basically look at 5 years from now. And we say, okay, how is traffic going to grow in those 5 years with the project and without the project? So that's included in the traffic study. We also looked at crash data. So those intersections, Reedsdale Road and Reed Street, we looked at crash data in terms of million entering vehicles. So how many crashes happening there on an annual basis?
And that's at the intersection
That's
and
at-
not on the road in between the intersections?
No, that's not on the corridor. That's at the intersection, plus or minus 50 feet to 100 feet back from the intersection. And so Mass DOT has crash data, and I compiled those crash data and looked at them, and both of those intersections fall well below the state and the district average in terms of crash rate. So when you look at it, there are no safety issues at either of those intersections. What I'd like to do is just move down now to the site vehicle axis and talk a little bit about this. And, you know, a lot of people might raise an eyebrow and say, well, it's a 4-lane roadway and you're discharging traffic out onto a 4-lane roadway. Absolutely. And I love that. And the reason I love that is you have 4 lanes. If you're slowing down to take a right, somebody can get by you in the next lane. So if you're coming southbound, okay, so north is to our right. If you're coming southbound, let me get a pointer that works here. If you're coming southbound and turning into the site, and you're in this rightmost lane, a vehicle that's behind you can easily get next to you and pass you as you're starting to pull into that lane.
If there's no traffic in the left lane.
That's right, if there's no traffic in the left lane. And the nice thing about being so close to a signal is you're guaranteed a gap in traffic. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment.
So what speed would a vehicle be going in the right-hand lane when it's turning into the intersection to be compliant with law and safety?
Most of the time, people execute maneuvers at somewhere around 10 miles an hour, plus or minus. So when you're
So when would they start slowing down? How far before that intersection?
Well, if you're traveling at 45 miles an hour, you know, you can do the math. I can do the math for you at some other point, but you're talking probably a couple hundred, 100 to 200 feet, plus or minus. I'd have to go through and do the numbers for you, but that's easy to do.
But you wouldn't recommend some type of a slip lane be put in on that right-hand side so that the vehicles who are traveling on Randolph Avenue could continue their regular speed where a car slowing down could slip over into that right-hand lane? And you probably have room for it on the frontage there.
You do, and based on the projected volume and based on the volume on Randolph Avenue, I would probably say I'd leave it as is, just based on the volumes and both projected and existing.
Would a slip lane hurt?
No, a slip lane would not hurt.
But you don't think it would materially help either?
Right now, I would say you would be fine based on the existing volume that's out there right now and based on the number of gaps, you'd be able to get by those vehicles that are turning.
Okay, why don't you continue? I'm sorry to
That's okay.
interrupt you.
That's great. I appreciate rolling up the sleeves and having the conversation. So just let's stay on Randolph Ave for a moment. I know this doesn't encapsulate the entire length of Randolph Ave from the 2 study area intersections, but it's basically a straight line. It's a tangent. And so in plan view, when we're looking at this from above, the sight lines were checked. The sight lines were checked for stopping sight distance and intersection sight distance. And what that means is people can stop safely, they can see a vehicle pulling out and stop if they need to, or the vehicles that are pulling out of the proposed access drive have enough time to judge a gap, accelerate, and join the traffic stream without impacting the traffic stream. Okay, so that's intersection sight distance. That was checked, and it's sufficient in both directions according to the American Association of State Highway Transportation Officials, or AASHTO. What's not shown here is if you take the road and you look at it from the side, the vertical profile. Okay, and some people might say, well, you've got a grade out there, and you do. It's about a 2.5 to 3% grade. You still have adequate sight lines from pulling out of the driveway to the north and to the south. So sight lines, both intersection sight lines and stopping sight distance sight lines, are not an issue for vehicles pulling out. Okay, one thing that's wonderful, in addition to the 4-lane roadway, one thing about having these signalized intersections as bookends to this project is they provide gaps. So we're not going to have a signal at this roadway. It's going to be stop controlled coming out. There'll be a stop sign here. Okay, but I was out here one morning and I sat there and I waited, and you know what? The signals went red on Randolph Avenue, and I was able to pull out because they're closely spaced and they provide the gaps that you require to pull out into traffic safely. Another benefit of the 4-lane...
What time were you there?
It was 8:45 to about 9:15 or so, plus or minus. And I could give you the exact details if you wanted those. A nice thing, too, about the 4-lane roadway is, and this is to your point, Mr. Chairman, in pulling out, again, if there's a vehicle approaching and for some reason you miss that vehicle coming at you, that vehicle could get by you because that lane is there. They're not going to slow down. Okay, so from a benefit of the four-lane roadway, yes, it's, you know, it's posted for 40 and 45 miles an hour, but the benefit of the four-lane roadway is wonderful. The benefit of the signals is wonderful, and you've got a stop control intersection for the driveway leaving. Okay? Any questions there?
When you say stop control, do you mean just a stop sign?
There'll just be a stop sign on the exit drive on the right-hand side. So people coming down the new driveway will have to stop at Randolph Avenue, wait for an acceptable gap in traffic, judge it, and take a left or right.
And then can go left or right?
That's right.
And in your professional opinion, the safety risk is minimal whether you're taking a left or you're taking a right?
Again, I was out there, the gaps appear because of the signals, and there were adequate gaps where I pulled out safely, accelerated, and stopped for the signal, or joined the traffic strip.
Are you driving a Porsche or a BMW or a Volkswagen?
I was in a 2000 Volvo that had, what did that have on it, 260,000 miles, so.
Good for you.
Yeah, it's gone now, but that's okay.
What's your view on speed as a factor in safety on this road?
In terms of what?
Just being able to accommodate those lefts.
Well, you're already accommodating vehicles pulling out of the driveways, and I'm sure we'll hear from residents at some point that they're going to say, well, you know what, it's very difficult for me to pull out, and if you're backing out, I can appreciate that. If you're backing into your driveway, I can appreciate that. In pulling into this site, there's nothing that's going to encumber you from having a safe and direct access pulling in, other than waiting for an acceptable gap. And the sight lines are sufficient along this corridor. In terms of crashes, I don't recall seeing any along this corridor in the last 3 years. With Mass DOT's crash data.
The crash data is out of date then, and it is out of date.
It's
But
out of date.
I think most people would say that the sight lines are contributing to a speed issue there, and I think it would help to just understand how speed on Randolph could impact the accommodation of especially those peak hour lefts.
Well, we could talk philosophically about speed and tangents. And if I were designing a roadway like this is an arterial roadway. People expect to be on this roadway, and they expect to be traveling at higher rates of speed because they're trying to go from point A to point B. In a subdivision or a residential area, you're going to have a lot of curves on that roadway. Okay? So from a tangent perspective and from a speed perspective, yeah, it's close to the speed limit, which is 40 and 45. We know that. We studied that. And that's a function of the type of roadway it is. It's a four-lane cross-section. It's a function of the fact that it's a tangent, a straight section. But the nice thing is, again, you have these signals that slow traffic down. And if, you know, Chairman and Board, if you visit the site and you wait for those signals to cycle, you'll see that there are these gaps, and you'll see that vehicles do go slower for a period of time when those two bookends are cycling.
But the lights are not presently timed, isn't that true?
They're not coordinated.
Coordinated is the word.
They're not coordinated. And that's,
does the Mass Highway Department normally cooperate with projects like this so as to coordinate the traffic lights?
We could certainly make a recommendation that they be coordinated. The great thing about uncoordinated signals here is you interrupt flow. Right? So, a perfect example, if we take a walk over to Quincy Shore Drive, okay? People start to run the red lights on Quincy Shore Drive because they're stopping so frequently. On a roadway like that where you've got 30 or 35 mile an hour posted speed limit, if you get a nice progression of traffic, you don't get the pedestrians fighting the traffic. You get the pedestrians waiting because they know they're going to find that gap, or they're going to push the button and they're going to get a walk signal in 30 seconds or a minute. In a condition like this, to have a coordinated signal, I'm going to gun it to get to the next signal, to make it, right? So it's nice that it's uncoordinated because it's completely random in terms of stopping.
So you would recommend that developer not seek to have coordinated lights, is that true?
I would leave them as they are.
As they are.
That's right.
I think it might be a little bit more complicated. I think there's some jurisdictional issues here, right? This is a state-numbered route.
This is 28.
But it's also a state highway.
Correct.
But is it state highway at the intersection?
Well, 28 turns there, so I'm not sure at that point
I
who
think it's under the control of the
what.
town at the intersection.
All four legs or just two? Because 28 turns.
The intersection of Reedsdale and I could be wrong on that. One question I have is, it would help to understand the jurisdiction because of the timing. I don't think Quincy Shore Drive is a good example. I mean, that's a DCR pleasure road. This is a real high-speed state highway. In terms of the sequencing of the timing, I think it would help to do a little due diligence on the extent of state highway in this section, because I know it's a state-numbered route throughout, and I probably have this somewhere in my own files, but At some point, it changes to town jurisdiction, and I think it's near the intersection.
So the discussion at hand, putting the jurisdiction aside, is should these two signals be coordinated?
Well, yeah, I know, that was John's
Well, I
point.
thought the
but-
materials that I read, I thought somewhere that
Yeah.
said that the developer was going to seek to coordinate them, and so you're just differing with that, and I just wanted to know why.
We wanted to change the timing.
Yes.
So changing the timing is different than coordinating it. So
Right.
changing the timing to address some of the deficiencies in the signalized intersection would be going out and giving more green time.
What's the present timing, and how would you coordinate the timing, or change the timing?
Change the timing. So I don't know what the present timing is without looking at the details.
Yeah.
But it means giving more green time to, I think it was northbound during the peak hours. And
Yes.
I have to go back and
So
check
that
that.
the flow would go right.
So you'd have a little more green time, a little more, 3, 5, 7 seconds more. I forget what the exact number is. I can go back and look. But the idea was leave them uncoordinated and change the timing.
And does Mass Highway Department normally coordinate with development projects to change that type of timing, or is that?
Yes. The developer would coordinate with Mass DOT and say, here's our projected volume, and here's what we'd like to do the timing, and either the developer would have a consultant come in and do the retime, or Mass DOT, depending on what they do, the district would come out and do the retiming.
Okay, let me ask you a question that just occurred to me, and it relates to the width of the entrance and exit. In terms of sight lines and safety, are you comfortable that 24-foot wide entrance and exit is adequate for sightline and safe entrance and exit purposes? Or if you had your druthers, would you prefer a 30-foot entrance? Is that safer or less safe?
Let's put it this way. If I had my druthers, there'd be less out there.
Less?
Less pavement,
Okay.
yes.
You'd go to what?
I'd go to 20.
20 feet?
20 feet.
And you think that would improve safety conditions?
It makes people go slower. A narrower lane slows people down.
Yeah, it's hard. I don't know about that.
The pushback is going to be, and typically it is the fire chief.
Yeah.
The fire chief is going to say, when I come down that roadway, I want my sirens blaring and I want people out of my way. Well, you know what? At 20 feet, people are still going to get out of your way. When they see a fire truck, most people, I realize that's that 1%, but most people will pull over and let the fire truck go by.
A standard lane width on an interstate highway is 12 feet. On an arterial like this, it might be 11. 10, I think, is pushing it. But
Well, now, we're not
it's a
talking.
driveway, though, so.
Exactly. So we're talking an arterial, and we're
Understand.
talking about, I would say, a cross-section out on Randolph Ave that is wider than it needs to be. You could shrink the lanes and probably reduce some of the speeds, and that's been proven in the highway capacity manual. Narrower lanes, slower speeds.
Oh, Randolph Avenue, yeah, I agree with that. Yeah,
Right.
absolutely. How much conversation have you had with MassDOT on this break in access? I mean, on the curb cut?
I haven't had a conversation at all with them as of yet.
Do the traffic warrants merit a signal here?
They do not. They do not more one. So the
If
question
they
is,
did, even if they didn't, would you recommend one?
I wouldn't. I wouldn't. Again, the gaps in traffic were frequent enough where you could pull out safely. And so the question is, according to federal regulations, in order for somebody to install the signal, you have to meet certain thresholds, certain volumes. And the projected volumes out here do not meet those thresholds. So in order to install the signal, you've got to meet the thresholds. None of our volumes meet the thresholds, so a signal would not be warranted.
And that even involves these press signals or whatever it is that
It wouldn't matter, John. MassDOT wouldn't put a signal
It
here.
wouldn't.
The traffic's not high enough. That's what they tell you.
All right.
So part of your homework is to have a conversation with the district?
Indeed.
Have you spoken with the chief of police?
I have not.
Or the fire department regarding access and ingress and
I know
traffic
that
conditions?
I know that Jim Burke has had conversations with at least the fire chief. I'm not sure about the police chief or public works.
Okay,
but
so
I
that's
haven't
his
had-
responsibility, and he reports to you on that.
Sure.
We hope. Okay,
He reports to the owner. How's that?
that's great.
I've got 2 slides left.
Yes, sir.
All right. So if we can walk through this together. So when we think about Randolph Ave, we're looking at the corridor right in front of the new site. Okay. And we analyze everything in terms of traffic, in terms of peak hours. So 2 peak hours during the day. There's one in the morning between 7 to 9 a.m. and there's one in the afternoon between 4 to 6 p.m. Okay. So out in front of Randolph Ave right now, there's approximately during the peak hour in the morning, 2,300 vehicles in both directions. Okay. During the peak hour, again, we're projecting to add approximately 48 new trips. All right, so some of those are going to be coming in, some of those are going to be leaving the site, okay? So it approximates to about one trip every 1.25 minutes. And when you look at the change to existing traffic, we're adding about 2%.
This slide would be improved if you broke that down as to how many people were taking left. I think the majority of those people would be heading north, right?
I have that in the report, and I can pull that up and we can
That's-
discuss it. In the afternoon, 5 to 6 p.m., we've got approximately 2,200 vehicles passing the front door, so again, both directions. And the site trips in and out somewhere around 68, and this is in accordance with the Institute of Transportation Engineers Trip Generation Handbook. And that's just about one per, just below every minute or so, and that's about 3% of the existing trips. And then over the course of the day, there's about 25,000 vehicles that go up and down Randolph Avenue, both directions. We're projected to add about 670 new trips, or about 2.7%.
And what's your mode split?
Yeah, right. Mode split, we were conservative. We didn't assume anybody was going to the bus. We didn't assume anybody was walking. These are all vehicle trips.
100% of the people leaving the site are leaving by car.
That's correct. By personal vehicle, that's right. So we can certainly talk to Milton, their planning department, see if they have any mode shares. But I'd be,
Not in this section of town.
yeah, we're probably talking 0.5%, if that. And one thing I just want to point out, if you've got the handouts, this, I think, is a 2.5 and a 3.7, and we just did some last-minute math, so it's 2.1 and 3.1. So in summary, what do we find? There was minimal traffic added by the development, approximately 2 to 3% increase during the peak hours. We talked about intersection site distance and sight lines along Randolph Avenue. Development site drive fulfills AASHTO site distance recommendations to enter from and exit to Randolph Ave with signal timing adjustments. Now, this is not coordinated. This is just improving the signal timing at those intersections. There's no adverse impact on overall operation of the intersections. And then crash rates that we've already talked about, well below state and district averages. And just to hammer this idea or this point home, we conducted counts when school was in session, no inclement weather. And then we grew them to reflect a typical month. And that's all in the traffic study.
So you're telling us that these statistics take into account inclement weather in snow and ice and rain and...
No, it's just the opposite. If
Okay.
you went out and counted vehicles, if we went out the day before Thanksgiving, it's a terrible analog, but if we went out on some snowy day,
Yep.
people are taking the train that don't normally take the train. They're taking the bus, they don't normally take the bus. And so there are not a lot of vehicle trips. So in good weather...
And people are going slower.
That's right. In good weather, it reflects what's actually happening for 95% of the time on the roadways. So we were able to capture what typically happens out there.
Yep.
Right.
Okay. Jeffrey, any questions? Virginia?
We don't have enough time.
Okay. Well, it's 10:15.
Understood.
Dr. Delaski, thank you very much
Thank
for
you,
your
Mr. Chair
for
and
being
board.
here. Mr. Whitten, do you want to come on up here and...
I'm happy to speak from here, Mr.
Well,
Chairman.
the only problem from speaking there is you can't be heard on the microphones. Good, why don't you introduce yourself and welcome to the Board of Appeals.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is John Whitten. I'm an attorney, law firm of Hugginson Whitten. We're in Newton, Duxbury, Massachusetts. Mr. Chairman, I've been practicing in this area for quite a long time. I teach at the Boston College Law School. I teach at Tufts University, Department of Urban and Environmental Policy and Planning. I'm a planner, I'm a lawyer, and I've been involved in the 40B process for cities and towns across the Commonwealth for a long time. I've litigated a lot of appellate cases and a lot of trials as well. Mr. Chairman, I have a lot of substantive comments on the project, but frankly, and I suspect many people in the audience do as well, but frankly, the more important comment to make is I believe that the town of Milton is consistent with local needs pursuant to the 1.5% calculation. And that is an important milestone, and the town should be commended for achieving this milestone. As the board knows, there are three means under the statute for achieving consistency with local needs. It's the holy grail. Cities and towns yearn to be in a position to say no to 40B developments that they don't want and to say yes with conditions to 40B developments that they can live with. It empowers the Board of Appeals. It's the reason the legislature set these three holy grails in place, to encourage you to achieve these milestones. And the good news for Milton is you've achieved at least one of them, and that is the 1.5% area calculation. And the way it works, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, is if 1.5% of your land area, based on a formula found in the statute and the regulations, if 1.5% of that land area is containing or contains subsidized housing units, DHCD's subsidized housing unit inventory, if you have 1.5% of that area with SHI units, you are consistent with local needs. And this is a rare opportunity for towns like Milton, because you're concentrated, you have a lot of state-owned property, a lot of highway land, so your denominator is a function of land that's remaining. You take 1.5% of that land area, and you measure that against your SHI housing. And according to information that's available through the town, through the planning department, through your GIS system, in draft form, my understanding is, in terms of the SHI numbers, there are well over 60 acres that are attributable to qualified SHI housing, and that does not count a serious number of group homes, because that acreage is undetermined, and that does not count other homes that DHCD will not provide addresses for. The magic number for Milton to be consistent with local needs is 53 acres, and you have well over 60. The reason it's important, Mr. Chairman and members of the board, to raise it tonight is when DHCD changed the regulations in 2008, an intentional, deliberate change to punish cities and towns, they moved the goalpost once again and changed the statute, which of course is not permissible, but that's a different issue, by saying that towns only had 15 days from the opening of the public hearing tonight to tell the applicant in writing, copy to DHCD, and special counsel obviously knows this well, that you are consistent with local needs. If you do not make that statement, even though the applicant is clearly on notice, you will not be able to assert this protective jurisdiction. So I respectfully request, Mr. Chairman, on behalf of my client, but I think, frankly, just as a course of good business, that the town of Milton speak to the planning director, determine the actual numbers, which I'm happy to opine, but it's really something you should get from the town, that the town of Milton meets this 1.5% calculation. But the clock is ticking starting tonight, so you only have 15 days. And it has to be in writing. The applicant, of course, is notified. Attorney Caggiano is notified, but DHCD must be notified as well in writing. Attorney Caggiano has an opportunity to rebut. DHCD will render a decision, and that's appealable through an interlocutory appeal. But it's very important, respectfully, on behalf of my client, that the board make this statement in writing pursuant to the regs within 15 days. I have many substantive comments, Mr. Chairman, but frankly, because the way the statute works, if the board does make this assertion, it suspends this entire process, and it's then dealt with at DHCD and the Housing Appeals Committee, and the board's hearing is suspended. Your 180 days is suspended, and we only see each other again, with all due respect, if the Housing Appeals Committee rules against you, which, based on the numbers, frankly, they can't do.
Well, let me see if my colleagues have any questions. Mr. Mullen, do you have any questions?
I don't
for
have
Mr.
any
Whitney?
questions.
Mr. King?
No, I don't.
Counselor, do you have any questions?
Well, I would just want to say that I did the research based upon the planning department put together a GIS calculation as to what was the amount of property square miles in the town that were available for consideration for this sort of exemption, the 1.5%. I went through our housing production plan, which has been approved by DHCD, went to the assessor's website, got the acreage for all of the sites that were listed on our SHI, and agree with Mr. Whitten that we are at 60 acres, and that the I was a history major, not a math major, but in my mathematical calculation, 53 acres is what we need, and we have 60.
I just make a point.
Please, Mr. Mullen.
I know I said I didn't have any comments, but is this an issue for the town to raise rather than the board?
With respectfully, if I could, Mr. Chairman, no, it must be raised by the Board of Appeals. And that's the other irony of the statute, is only the board, under the way the regs work, can make this assertion. Not the selectman, not the town administrator, only the Board of Appeals.
Could you give me a statutory reference, Mr. Whitney?
Of course, it's Chapter 40B, Section 20, and 760 CMR 56.0.
I'm sorry, do that again. 760 CMR.
760 CMR 56.03.
Yep.
And your procedural requirements, Mr. Chairman, are found in 56.03 subsection 8.
Great. Thank you very, very much. I appreciate it.
Well, that makes things a lot different now.
It may.
Mr.
Yeah.
Chairman, if I may.
Of course you may, Mr. Caggiano.
Would you please share your calculations for the 60 acres or 63 acres? 60 acres, sorry. Did you have a copy of the calculation that you could provide to me?
You want a pencil and markings on my sheet of paper? Yes.
Yes,
Sure.
you want her calculation?
But this is my only copy, so I'm not providing it tonight.
Okay,
I'll copy it for you.
that'd be great, thank you.
If you give me your email address, I'll email it to you.
Absolutely.
And do you have a copy of the GIS calculations that you were using as well?
Yes.
Okay,
And
if
I'll
you
send
could
both
share all that.
pages. Yeah.
And would you be kind enough to
Absolutely.
favor the board with that similar?
Certainly.
Okay. I think,
Just to add one more thing, I
Please.
think Mass Housing and DHCD would both be surprised to hear this. I've had verbal conversations with both of them, and without running the calculations, they said that they do not believe and would be surprised if Milton had reached that threshold.
Mr. Chair, if I could just...
Do they maintain a complete inventory of all of the cities and towns in the Commonwealth and whether or not they've reached the statutory compliant? Is there anything like that?
Not the 1.5%, no.
No, no, the only thing they keep track of is whether you've reached your 10%, but not
Right.
the 1.5. Because that would change as you change zoning every year. Because, as you said, you calculate it every time based upon what's available under residential, commercial, or industrial zoning, and that would change, as towns change.
And the time to calculate it is as of the first date of the beginning of the public hearing?
Yes.
Under the regs, you have to, not under the statute, but under the regs. So if...
The illegal regs, according to you.
Well,
Whether they're legal or illegal.
that's what he
with all due respect,
No.
they are. Because
When did they change the regs?
the regs were changed substantively in 2008. Because, as we know, a reg
We
can't
know.
trump a statute.
We know.
So that's why. But in any event, DHCD, if I could, Mr. Chairman, just respond to
Yes,
my
please.
brother's comment. DHCD does not do this for us. Mass Housing does not do this for us because, frankly, they don't want you to achieve consistency with local needs. So
It would be a lot of work for them to do it, though,
and
for
it sure would-
351
It
cities and
sure
towns.
would. So the burden is on the municipality
I understand.
to assert that
I
status.
asked the question because I wanted to know if there's a readily identified source to which the board could refer and say, okay, now, there's some, you know.
No.
Okay.
Attorney O'Donnell is absolutely right. It's just something that the number, other than the 1.5%, because your land area doesn't change.
Then it will be important for the board to see Ms. Attorney O'Donnell's work.
well, I think that's exactly right. And I think also that if the board is considering sending such a letter as Mr. Whitten is urging us to do so, we obviously have to make sure that Mr. Caggiano isn't caught short and not given enough time to do whatever independent research you want to do or to file any response. I'll say to Mr. Whitten's request, so in light of that, and I understand what Mr. Whitten is saying, I'm unfamiliar with the technical statutes, but they certainly have the citations to get them. Ms. O'Donnell is going to provide us with the information. My suggestion is that we take this hearing and continue it for 7 days or something like that, relatively short period of time that's well within the 15-day period that gives us an opportunity to study the issue. It gives Mr. Caggiano the opportunity of making any type of presentation that you want, that the 1.5 has been met or not been met, it doesn't apply, whatever it is, and then the board can vote with still plenty of time left whether to send the appropriate notice to the state agency.
And Mr. Chairman,
Please.
that's perfectly reasonable. The only thing I'd say, though, the regs have built in an opportunity for Attorney Caggiano to object. The 15 days is very little time for a board that meets irregularly, a volunteer board in December. So
if we file the notice, what do the regs provide Mr. Caggiano with?
He has 15 days after he's received the notice to object to the challenge our assertion, and he does that in writing by notice to the department with a copy to us, to the board.
Okay.
So he does have the opportunity, with any documentation he wants to provide, to attest that assertion.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, if I may.
Please, of course you may.
I would suggest that, from the board's perspective and from everybody's perspective here, I think it would make sense for us to continue this to a period before the 15-day period, because I don't think you want to, obviously you make your own decisions, but it would be a waste of time if the project was inappropriately denied because of the calculations. I would just like the opportunity to look at the calculations and respond to them so the board can make an informed decision about whether or not they want to proceed down this path.
Mr. Chairman, no one's suggesting the project's going to be denied. The consistency
It
with...
just delays the project, it delays the
Well, only
the
if,
processing.
only if my brother objects.
Well, of course he's going to object.
But maybe not, Mr. Chairman, because there are plenty of 40Bs approved in Cambridge, plenty of 40Bs approved in Amherst. These communities have been well over 10%. They've achieved it. My only point, Mr. Chairman, is that no one's suggesting the project be denied. This is a step to achieve or ascertain that protection.
Yes, sir. I understand that. I understand that. And in any event, if we elected to vote to send such a notice to at least protect the town's legal position on that issue without waiving it, that has to be done after discussion at an open meeting. And so we're not going to vote and discuss that under darkness of night. So I guess my question is, I would suggest that we continue this hearing for a short period of time. I say approximately a week. Let's look at our calendars so that we can research this issue, get the information we need, and come to an intelligent decision. And I think that we should, obviously, Mr. Casciano was invited to attend that meeting, and you can make any arguments you want, and the board will come to a fair decision on that.
Mr. Chairman, I would just add that we had December 9th is the Conservation Commission hearing.
Yes.
We're scheduled to be in front of your Conservation Commission on a week from today. So we're happy to accommodate. We just have that schedule in conflict.
Okay, today is the 2nd, that's the 9th? Is
Yes.
that right?
Wednesday the 10th.
Wednesday, the 10th is fine with me, I think. The 10th is a particularly bad day for me because I unfortunately have, how do I put it, cosmetic surgery at Mass General Hospital on the 10th in the afternoon. So I may not make it back here in time.
Do you want us to meet you there?
I would like to have you substitute yourself for taking a little growth off of my cheek, but it's not to be. What time are you appearing before the Conservation Commission on the 9th? Probably 7:30?
7:30.
Yeah, I think it's 7:30. I don't have it here.
That does it.
How about Monday?
What is Monday? The
The
8th. I'm free Monday, the 8th.
Mr. Chairman, I don't mean that the board should revolve its schedule around mine, but I couldn't do the 8th.
Okay. Can you do the 9th?
I could do the 9th. I'll be here along with Attorney Casciano for the Conservation Commission meeting.
Mr. Mullen, you can't do the 9th?
They're gonna have Concom that night.
But unless it's an earlier time than
Is the 11th available?
I'm at a hearing in Middleborough. I represent the town of Middleborough, Mr. Chairman. I'm there that evening.
What's the 12th? All right.
The 11th is out? Is that,
You have hearings with the
well, I know we do, but why can't we
Could we work around the Concom?
do 7 or something like that? Well, Jeffrey, you're not available on that date.
Is the 16th available?
That's just cutting it awfully short.
It is.
I don't like that. The 11th is out?
Could we do the 9th before or after the Concom?
Well, that's what I'm suggesting, but Jeffrey Mullen can't make it.
What's the following Monday?
How about the 12th?
15th.
Friday night?
I hate it, Friday night, but, I mean, do we have to,
You're going to need
do we have to meet at night? I've never held a meeting during the day.
You can defer to Kathleen, you can meet anytime you post.
I can't meet on the 12th, I have a concert. So I'm singing on the 12th. But that's in the evening. We could do.
Well, how about on the 9th during the day, Jeffrey? Do you have some time during the day? No.
In the
How about
morning.
the 10th in the morning? No.
I'm gonna be
Are you
UMass.
going to Aruba or something? What are you doing? This is ridiculous.
I'm on the UMass board. Tuesday.
Get Mr. Thomas to excuse you. So,
He might do that, actually.
how about Monday, the 8th?
It's fine.
I'm not available, I'm gone all day.
The whole day?
I apologize.
That's too bad.
Well,
Well, again, I'm not asking the board to change the schedule because of me.
No, I
I'm
understand.
just-
It looks like the only day we can do this is the 10th. Can you do the 10th?
I can.
Well, what are you going to do? I'll just come with my bandages on, seeking sympathy, and I prefer not to do it.
can we do it we're doing it in the evening on the 10th or in the morning on the 10th?
I would love the morning, but I think Jeffrey Mullen's at UMass. What time are you staying up there, Jeffrey?
Amherst, sorry.
How about you there the 11th as well?
No.
No. How about the 11th in the morning?
Yep, it's fine.
11?
I represent the town of Stoneham in this exact same matter, and I have an HAC appeal at 10 that morning.
So how about the afternoon on the 11th?
Well, it's a trial, so I think there's a better chance that I could make that, so if that's convenient for the board and Attorney Caggiano.
Mr. Casciano, what do you say?
I'm sorry, which
On
day?
the 11th?
Of the 11th? Sure.
In the late afternoon, if that's acceptable.
Sure. Do you want to, 5 o'clock? Does that sound right? I mean, it's a terrible time to come out of Boston, I can assure you. It's fine. It's just, it's brutal.
Just avoid the
Yes,
lefts.
the traffic consultant.
We're talking about the 11th at 5 o'clock. 5:30, make it easier, what? Earlier.
I can be flexible, either way.
What's better for you, Mr. Whitten, 4 or 5?
4 would be better, I think.
Okay.
The HAC hearing I should be out hopefully by 3.
4? No. Jeffrey says no.
5?
You gotta work sometime. All right.
What's your best time? On the 11th? In the afternoon, later?
I have to say later's better, I mean, just realistically.
Okay.
I'll
The
do
12th in the
whatever
morning?
works for you guys.
What's that?
The 12th in the morning? Did we try that one yet?
I can do the 12th.
That's fine, too.
Mr. Whitten can't do it. I want to have Mr. Whitten here.
5 is better, John.
Okay. Let
5 on the 11th.
5 on the 11th? Okay. So what we're going to do by unanimous vote, presumably with the consent of Mr. Caggiano, we're going to continue this hearing to the 11th of December at 5 o'clock in the afternoon to discuss this issue regarding the 1.5 in open session and render a decision on it. Mr. Caggiano is going to get whatever materials we have. If you can do any study you want, Mr. Caggiano, we're delighted to hear from you.
Thank you.
But I trust, Mr. Whitten, that you have additional time if you need it, if we so vote. And at that hearing, what we will do is we'll also discuss the reschedule. Well, if we vote to do the 1.5, then we probably won't have to get involved in the rescheduling. It's an automatic stay. But we'll coordinate how the hearings are going to proceed after we decide how to vote on this issue.
Very good.
Okay?
So, I'm sorry, just to clarify, the only issue that we're going to talk about is that issue.
Yes, the 1.5 issue.
And,
yes.
we're inviting anyone who so chooses to submit to us materials for our consideration for the purpose of deliberation?
Absolutely, and the sooner.
And those are due to us not later than?
I'd say not later than the 9th. Can we do something by the 9th or the 10th?
Mr. Chairman, I am relying on the town's database, so I don't anticipate submitting anything. Happy to if it's helpful to the board.
Okay, well, the town may, maybe.
Well, you know, the reason I ask that is, and I've drawn the distinction between the town and the board, is the board has very little staff. And, you know, this is the first 40B hearing I've sat in. I've been on this board a long time, so I'm learning, you know, some of the fine points, and I'll read it, but it would help to have a little bit of background.
Understood. Thank you.
And I think that would be helpful if we had it by the close of business on the 9th. And Mr. Caggiano, what we will do is we will either email or fax any materials we receive to you.
Okay.
So you can have that. You can be doing your independent study while this is going on, and then we can see where we're going with this. Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
So this hearing's going to be adjourned until the December 11th at 5 in the afternoon. Presumably this place. Let me okay. Thank Mr. Whitten for your presentation. Thank Mr. Caggiano, all your witnesses for their kindness, and thank everybody for being so nice and staying so late. So we're adjourned.